Hello? Can everyone hear me? I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's now 6:32. Will you please rise if possible? We'll have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Paul?
Andrew Benson. Katrina Mankowitz. Here. Doug Date.
Here.
Joseph Wetmore.
Here.
Edward Levine.
Here. So item number 4, which is probably the first order of business, is the resolution granting a waiver for the requirements of the Town of Lansing Land Use Ordinance Plan Development Area number 1, which is Village Circle - Village Solars. It's like section 1610, 17. So, having said that, do you gentlemen want to come up front if possible, in case the board has any questions? So, let me paraphrase, and if I talk out of turn or am incorrect, feel free to give me accurate information. This is an ongoing project. A project that the Village Solars, which we've had a variety of different adjustments to the PDA as circumstances warrant it. And as a long-term project has it sometimes, you're going to come up with certain circumstances you didn't foresee 10 years ago, like the untimely death of your father. So having said that, when we look over this waiver, which is in that PDA agreement, there are certain conditions that you discussed at the planning board meeting, because like anything else, what assurances do we have? Now personally, you've been good partners with the Town of Lansing, and as the power plant was devalued, you're one of the reasons why we could keep our tax base the way it is and protect our schools and protect everything else. So thank you for that. Having said that, my understanding was that the next 2 buildings that were planned was an apartment building and the community center. And since things have changed and you may now have an opportunity to acquire more land that your father and stepmother owned, you now want to do a waiver on that, build another building in place of that, or at least have the waiver to see if the deal goes through. Right? If the deal doesn't go through, you'll still build that 1 apartment building and the community center. If it does go through, you will build that building and another building, and then the next one you'll build will be a bigger community center, and that's the only thing you'll build that you follow. You also will forfeit, for right now, 2 building permits, so you can't build any more buildings until you build that community center, that bigger one. So if I walk through this, let's say hypothetically, and I use that word a lot now, I'm learning. Let's say that the deal goes through, you build 2 buildings this year, right? Keep your crews active and everything. Keep the 30 full-time jobs, 15 part-time jobs in the Lansing community, and then you will be committed to build that community center the next year, or the next building, and that's the only thing you'll build. And then from there, you'll be allowed to build other things. Is that correct? Did I summarize?
That's correct. Somewhere in there, we're going to build 2 buildings this year to give us the waiver.
Right. That second building will take the place of the smaller community center, but if the deal falls through, you'll be committed to build that smaller community center in that 1 building.
No.
No. Okay. So once you...
That's where I misunderstand. I mean, we won't know about the deal until we have started that second.
I see. So there's a timing consideration here, which means you'll be starting those 2 new buildings.
Starting 119.
Right.
Almost as soon as you give us the waiver, as the second building in this cycle. And then the very next building would be the community building, wherever.
Wherever.
If you give us the waiver.
All right. So you're hoping that you get the authorization for the second apartment building, which you'll start. If the deal goes through, you build a bigger one on a different footprint. If it doesn't go through, you'll build the original considered where it was. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And as you know, I've been through every building. Let's see, there's 19 steps to the first landing, go around, there's 9 steps to the second landing. I gotta tell you, 26A is my favorite. That's the one.
Joe was up there too.
Yeah, that's the one on the first floor to the side, I gotta tell you. So having said that, I've given some of the background as far as this goes to the board. I'm gonna back off a little bit here and let the board discuss if they have any questions for you or concerns before we consider this resolution, okay? So feel free.
Okay, I have a question. So the reason for not doing a community center is because with more buildings, you think you'll need a larger one?
Yes. And we'd be able to relocate it from its current location to a more central location in the whole project.
So what is the reason for not still building it? If the deal goes through, why are we not building it as the second building? Why are there 2 buildings before the community center gets started?
Well, our financing has always been around 2 buildings, and the only way we can proceed now, like within the next month, to get into a cycle where they're completed by July, because that's when we're most successfully moving people in, is to start that second building here within the month. And we don't know what the outcome of our offer is, or in other words, we don't know at this point which of the community buildings we would build. And if we're successful in what we want to do, which is have the bigger one more centrally located, we need a little more time to finish the design for that, because it would be a little more inclusive in terms of the services that are offered to the community.
So you say that you can't get the financing you need without doing the 2 buildings. So how are you going to get it before to do the 1 building in the community center? Was it just part of a building? Is
Well,
that how
the death occurred in the midst of all this.
Okay, but I'm just wondering at the funding. I'm very sorry about your loss, and it does complicate things. But you said you can only get funding for the 2 buildings. So I'm just wondering.
Well, that's what the banks are. It's not just the 2 buildings. Every cycle, we've done pretty much the same total, even though the first phase, we did 3 buildings, was about the same money as, and we subsequently have been trying to do 40 or 48 units a year, and the market has pretty much absorbed them almost immediately. So that's what the banks look at and they're comfortable with. 1 building, if we only did 1 building, then our workforce would be out of work in 4 or 5 months. And we would lose that workforce until we had regrouped the following summer. So that workforce is set up to build those 40 or 48 units a year.
So how will that workforce be affected by the following build cycle?
Well, the community building will be bigger. We expect to have that building, you're going to give us to January 2021 under the waiver, but we would hope to have it open in July again. And then we would proceed with 2 more buildings after that, after the community building was open.
Thank you.
Is there any timeline on when the property may close?
Well, we're in the process of making the offer, and I can only tell you because I'm the surveyor for the estate. The properties are selling a mile a minute, so we're hoping that that's an indication that the offer will be accepted. we would know it in a couple months. You know, you'll know because we'll be back to the planning board talking about a change in location at that point. If not, then we'll be talking about the design of the community building as it was first intended to be.
That's all I have.
My understanding is this is not the first delay on the community building. It was supposed to be scheduled at some prior point, and it got delayed at that point. Can you tell me more about that, please?
Yes, we proposed the original project proposed in 12 and 13 called for 170 apartments. So we designed a community building to serve those 170 units. A few years ago, we came back and we were able to expand the project to about not quite double the size. And so we had to change the first community center from being sized for the first project to being sized for the second. It's about twice the size. So that was the reason for the first change. This is the second change.
Which sounds like a similar thing, as you keep saying the project's getting bigger, and thus the community center is getting pushed further and further down the line in terms of being built. Is that correct?
Well, Joe, I think you have to take into consideration, if we'd gone ahead to build the first community center, it would be inadequate. It would have been $1 million mistake. We don't want to build it in 6. We've been fortunate to be working with the Lansing Town Board and the Planning Board, and they've worked with us as we figured out what the market is. And so that's how we got here.
Right, I'm just hearing 2 times in a row now you're saying the project's getting bigger, and so we need to delay the community center to build a bigger, nicer one.
Basically, yeah,
Okay.
be able to provide better service.
Right, and you try to plan these things out in advance. I've spoken with Rocco, and I've kind of like put together kind of the timeline of how you guys plan these things out. So, you know, starting back in the fall of 2017, you were telling the building residents in Building 36 that we're probably not going to renew your lease. And then, what do you call it? So that's when you started.
That was the only one, yeah.
Yeah, so you start telling people well in advance of your plans because you plan these things out in advance. Rocco unfortunately dies in March of 2018, which is a while ago, so you guys have had time to kind of start to...
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that.
Rocco died in March of 2018.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
Yes, and that's given you some time between then and now to start thinking this out. And so by fall of 2018, my understanding is you told the building residents in 36 you're not going to renew their lease. That's the last renewal for that building. That's my understanding from our discussion.
That sounds right. Yeah.
And then somewhere around the end of May of 2019, you start talking with your funders about the next round of buildings because you got to sit down with the banks and work
We
it.
started talking to them in January.
In January
It
of
takes
2018.
about 6 months.
January of 2018.
2019.
2019. So January 2019, you start talking to the banks about building what?
What we're going to be building right now.
Which is?
13 and 36.
So in January, you're telling the banks that you didn't think you were going to build a community center next.
Right, at that point in January, it had already become apparent that there may be a change, is essentially what happened.
The estate was very complicated, Joe.
I understand that.
And it's taken a while to figure out who's who and what's what.
I understand the complication.
So there's been a little bit of a delay. As soon as we knew for sure, we took action. But in our business, it's very common for us to make 5, 10, 15, 20-year plans and variations of each. So if you ask me what I was thinking in January, it would take a considerable amount of time to go through it.
Right, well, what I'm hearing...
So what we're trying to do is create an organic approach to development. We're trying to remain flexible. We're watching all the new development around us. And
What you're not listing in your history there is, I mean, we had a pretty complete plan for the community building. You know, it had to go to the next stage of construction drawings, but it wasn't like there had been discussion and thought both with the planning board and with the architect I work with. So it's not like, you know, Steve mentioned that, I guess as much as I want to talk about the estate, it's a 36-page will, and some of it's split between the widow and the trust. So it's complicated, even for the attorney that's the co-executor. So
I have no doubt that it's complicated, and I know that these projects take time to plan out. What I'm confused about is why you're talking to your bank at the beginning of this year about not building the community center, and you wait till July to talk to the town about
Well,
changing
because
it.
we were aware of what was going on around us. We talk to banks all the time.
Mhm.
We never stop talking to them.
Mhm.
Because as regulations have increased, it's taking more and more time to get a loan. We used to do it in 90 days. Then it went to 120. Now it's 180 to 200. So whenever you're talking to these people, you're always talking to them about everything that you're doing.
Mhm.
But to get a loan to build a project like this is a massive affair.
I'm
And
sure.
it never reaches a serious state until after you have gotten a commitment letter, done your appraisals, and gone through the entire negotiation with the bank. This in itself takes months,
Mhm.
and it's very complicated.
So does renegotiating the plan development area, and I'm just not understanding why, when you understood back in January that there was a second path you wanted to take.
There's dozens of paths,
I understand, but
not just one.
We just-
but those
I think
paths
it's-
all would require
I
change
think
to the PDA.
you're overstating, you know, how plausible that was. Again, you know, I'm being repetitious, but there was a lot going on with the death and the will and the execution thereof.
These are all way beyond our control.
And, you know, so we had to cover all the possibilities at that point, Joe. I just don't.
Well, I think that I can answer a little bit as to your question, and that is that we were talking about several options at that time. We didn't necessarily know in which direction we wanted to go. Part of the discussion on which direction we want to go involves seeing what the banks will accept, what sort of financing terms we can be offered for different options, and that sort of thing. So, you know, I think that pretty much as soon as we knew what path we definitively wanted to go down, we did come to the town. But, you know, beforehand, we have to do some negotiations with the banks just to see what's plausible, what kind of terms they're going to offer you in terms of loan to value, what have you. And I think that's really the explanation for the timing difference.
But that doesn't make sense to me, because you don't have a definitive yes from this board either. You need to find out what this board's willing to do. And so why wouldn't you come to this board and sound us out and say, at a time in which there's all the cards available on the table, instead of coming to us at the last minute and saying, well, we're going to have to get rid of our crew if you don't say yes to this. So it's kind of like, I feel like you walked up to the wall and said, well, we made all our decisions up to this point. If you don't say yes, you don't have a choice, as opposed to
Joe, we
talking
haven't
to
even
us.
approached
Excuse me.
the state yet.
Excuse
We
me.
need to hear from you guys before we can even approach them. So we're still not at a place where we can go and make all this happen.
Well, I think that to answer your question
And
directly,
there's all
Joe,
these
it's,
things, they're just out of our control.
to
If I
answer,
can interject here, they did go in front of the planning board, did they not? They get a recommendation from the planning board, move forward on the waiver. In situations like this, I try not to get hung up on why you didn't do this, why you didn't do that. I try to evaluate what's the worst case scenario. All right? What if your waiver is granted and you go forward? What's the worst thing that can happen?
There's no worse thing.
You build the
Either
two
way, it's
buildings.
going to get built.
You build the two buildings this year,
Yeah.
and you build a community center somewhere
Next year.
next year.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's it.
On the other
That's it.
hand, a little more history, you didn't have the micro units when you first started phase one. You had 3 bedrooms, didn't you?
it was one of the primary reasons for our first change, yes?
And as good business people, you realized what the market was. So rather than keep building these 3 bedrooms and try to lowball everywhere like everybody else is trying to do with the free rent, you saw a different business plan. I'm not lying by saying
No, you're not lying.
No, and so now you develop these micro units for around $900. Once you include the electricity, you have, having been in those, took the liberty when the doors were open, walk through them, we didn't mind, and look around. And for a 1 bedroom, it's a little bit bigger than an efficiency apartment. you have this market, I think you have a waiting list, don't you?
Right, as close as I've ever been.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be antagonistic as far as this goes. You are, as anybody wants to do business here, you are our partners. I mean, that's one reason why our tax base is so healthy in certain areas. So once again, I ask the board, what's the worst case scenario is that they're either going to build this community center where it's designed next year, or you're going to build this community center elsewhere next year. Either way.
Correct, real easy.
I mean, and you're also giving up, if I read this right, number 22, and is it number 2?
Yes, that's correct.
Down below, so you forfeited those building permits, so you can't all of a sudden come back to us next year and say, well, you know, I'd rather do this now because we're going to lose our crew. So, in all fairness, the board will simply say, you know what, we've been down that road, the answer is no next year. So you're kind of boxed in as far as I'm concerned, what your options are. I'm not so much in, getting hung up on the timetable, because I trust our partners, and there's rules and regs and there's safeguards right here. These safeguards are you either have option A or option B, depending if you can sell that estate or not. And I don't know about you, but some of these estates keep going on for years.
This one will too.
So,
Hopefully we can shorten the process.
I guess, in general, what we just want is assurance that there will be a community center.
Absolutely.
Next year.
I was the one
And
who
that's
originally
what's-
proposed it.
Right.
I mean, the board didn't compel me to have it. I wanted it because I need it for my project. The community center is the most important piece. It's a unique building. It's going to be the only dual-use building in the entire area where you have residential on the upper floors and you have commercial on the first floor. If you think about city center and how that's a lot taller, that's 3 times as high, but it's the same concept. And that's what we're talking about here. So I just beyond me. Plus, I got $500,000 into the lot for the community center. It's costing me $2,000 to $3,000 a month, and has been for years as I work to seek a better solution. So we are sacrificing. You do already have something over us. We have this massive bill generating from the original community center. But what we want to do is build it right the first time. Look what's happening down at the East Point project. Do you realize their rents are 50% higher than ours? 50%. We're building affordable product, unsubsidized. These guys come in and they do all this big money stuff, and look what happens. Now it's a 3 months rent. Now it's $250 cash to each buyer. There's 7 or 8 people in that thing, and it is the end of August. It's over. So yeah, remember, we're also providing community housing, subsidy or affordable housing. Our affordable housing doesn't cost you a penny. It's free. In fact, we're paying you in dollars.
You build beautiful buildings. I took a tour of the project, and I liked what I saw, and I will admit that as the project has progressed, the apartments have gotten even nicer. Because you show me a progression, of here's the first stage, here's the second stage, and they're getting nicer. I totally agree with that. I also hear from the residents that they felt they were going to have a community center years ago, and they feel like it keeps getting pushed further into the
Did
future.
you have somebody you spoke to actually said that?
Yes.
Because we have not offered, you mentioned it's coming in the future, but we have never offered it as a part of any lease that is existing.
No, they don't. Nobody said it's part of their lease. They said it's part of the, it's about to happen, it's going to happen soon, and they keep seeing a timetable that it keeps getting pushed back. And that's why,
It's been pushed back once.
and they're
Now we're
actually,
looking at the second time. But remember, look at the circumstances.
I'm
If
just telling
we
you
had
what I'm
gone
hearing
with
from
if we'd gone
residents.
with the original building, it would have been $1 million mistake. And
I,
we'd be back here trying to build a new one. The company would have been behind the 8 ball. We would have had to increase our prices. And maybe instead of being 50% higher than us, our competitors will only be 25. But we have to make these calls in the field when they're happening. We're working in 3 dimensions. We're surrounded by competitors, old and new. And it's up to us to figure out a way to get through.
I mean, things we've done, Joe, is the dog park wasn't in the original plan. I mean, the basketball court was, and we've done that now. You know, I would say any of you who have looked at the landscaping, it's way behind anything we promised, and it's kept after. It's not like a lot of projects where it's put in and let go, and what do you have in 2 years?
And I spent a lot of time with TCAT advocating for them to circle around your project as opposed to telling everybody to stand in the snow.
They were moving.
And because I think that was important, and so I'm really trying to work with you where I can. I just feel that it's time to get a community center, and I don't think that we're going to get that much more by moving it across the street. I think that the residents are expecting one now. It's part of the original point of the PDA, and there's a lot of what ifs. What if you get the next piece of property? What if you come to us with a new PDA that we're going to approve? Because that's a long process, and I don't see that process happening so quickly that next summer you're going to start building a new community center. And so I'm worried that it's going to get delayed again, because a revised PDA is not quick. It's going to go through the planning board, then it goes through the town board, and you, better than anyone else, knows that that takes time.
Well, that's why you're here. And that's why we're here. And what we're doing is we're producing superior product. We're up for national awards. Village solars are being built in Albany right now, as we speak. And the thing is spreading. So we've really got our hands on, we got a tiger by the tail. And it may look disorganized to certain people when they look at it from a distance, but if you come in and you join us, you sit in some of these meetings, you see the complexity of what's going on. And if you look at our profile, I mean, our clients, the market has already decided. We are number one. We've turned the entire Northeast upside down. We've made history. We used to be on the bottom, now we're on the top. And it doesn't seem like there's any competition.
And, you know, just to...
It's because we're providing affordable housing that is spectacular.
Right, and just to sort of address your point on the community building, I think that one of the things we need to make clear is it's not just moving the community building, it's also expanding it. If we are able to do what we want to do, then the project's going to increase in size by 30-ish%, thereabouts. And that's going to create a situation where you can put more community amenities in. We can have a bigger health club facility, we can have a larger restaurant area, we can have more community space. And not only that, but we can put it back where our dog park basketball court are and really have a nice little community area that is well integrated and makes the most sense. And that's really what we're going for here, is we want to have the project that makes the most sense at the end of the day.
It's going to be successful.
And,
Yeah, that's
you know,
the thing.
I think that residents who are looking for the community center, you know, if you're coming in here for just 2 or 3 years, that's not necessarily your concern. Those are the long-term people who really care about that. And they are our biggest concern. You know, we want to maintain our retention rates to the maximum extent possible. And that means we have to give them something that they truly can't get anywhere else, and that's what we want to do here. So that's our reason.
I think we've discussed this enough.
I got one more point I want to go to.
Well, okay, we've been talking about this for 20 minutes, Joe, and I know you don't understand, and you keep asking the same questions. So at some point, we need to make an action either to accept this or not. So one more question, then we got to move on.
The original footprint of the PDA included the property that you're hoping to acquire and included putting buildings on there, much like what you're describing now. Why was the community center not sized for the size of the original PDA?
Well, so, there it is.
Okay.
Well, it was a joint proposal by 2 different corporations, however you want to look at it. And we had no control over Rocco's corporation, although I represented both of them as a design engineer and my son, the architect at the time. So we presented a cohesive project to the extent we went to. Rocco, at the time, he was about 80, and he had intentions of building his own part of that. As things unfolded, he built one building, and his wife felt that the health care that was involved was more important than building more buildings. And that's the easiest explanation I can give you of why that didn't move forward, is in parallel with the building solars.
I don't think you're understanding my question. You had this large project that was approved as a PDA, which included 2 different corporations that were building apartment buildings and one community center for the entire PDA. Why was the community center not sized for the entire PDA, is what you're describing to me now?
They didn't have any ownership in the other half.
Well, we didn't have the geography to do what we're telling you now. You know, we put it where it was the most visible to the people entering the project. You know, if we were to do it for the whole project now, a more central location, because you were successful with the transit. I mean, at the time, TCAT didn't even want to talk about bus stops. You know, now they've kind of seen the population grow. Steve has made the arguments that we're not that far from the industrial park in terms of accessibility to those routes, and so they saw the wisdom of cutting out a route where they had two people getting on and off on some side of the route and added to this. So again, it kind of evolves. I don't know, I wish I had a perfect crystal ball. And I told you at an earlier meeting, we're not billionaires, so we don't come in with these huge projects like Steve was talking about. I mean, you know, it's a little bit of learn as you go and work with the local banks as much as you can. But I think it's turned out to be, you know, might sound funny, better than we expected.
Joe, did you see the building that my father built?
From
Is
the
that one
outside.
Robert Tower? You can see how that's a completely different vision. He had a separate vision. So he wasn't going to be a part of our community center. But otherwise, we would have built it to the size of the entire BDA. But
I thought the community center and the amenities were open to the general public.
no,
Well, the ones which are like the restaurant, for example,
yeah.
you know, that,
The community center in the first floor, it's a commercial property. It's all leased, it's all commercial. So, no. Yeah, that's just simply what it
yeah,
is.
to the extent that commercial properties are open to the public, certainly they
Yeah.
will all be. But, you know, for example,
We're not,
our
in other
amenities-
words, I made the statement, excuse me, Rocco, that we're not building a gated community like across the street. So that comment may have been construed to mean that this community building was open to everybody 20, no, it's a private building. That we're going to lease the services on that first floor that we hope will complement the balance of the project. But that's the reason why it wasn't included, because you had two different owners, two different visions. The original community center that we proposed was based on our original, half of the original proposal. It's kind of unusual. We went along with it because we thought it would help my father if he had something to do. So that's what we did. We did a subdivision with him. But he got to do something. He wanted to go up on the project.
I'd like to move on. I'd like to entertain a motion to grant a waiver for the requirements of the Town of Lansing Land Use Ordinance Plan Development Area Number 1, those solars.
I'll move.
I'll second. Go ahead.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Hall?
Katrina Binkowitz.
Yes.
Doug Date.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
No,
Edward Levine.
Yes. Okay, gentlemen.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Item number 5, we have the town streetlight conversion to LED. Cornell Cooperative Extension and Representative Terry Carroll. How are you tonight, Mr. Carroll?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good.
All right. I'm not really sure where to get started on this. I know you've had a couple of presentations, maybe one by Casey and NIPA, or maybe we're kind of starting from the beginning. I guess to kind of explain my involvement in this a little bit more. I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension, obviously. I'm the Clean Energy Communities Coordinator. I came in here to talk about that program probably 7-8 months ago. Luckily, we were able to help the community become a designated community, get some funding. And in part of my job, I've been going around Tompkins County as well as around the southern tier and helping communities look at their LED streetlights, looking at their current streetlights and seeing, what options they have in order to convert it to LEDs. Here in Tompkins County, there was an initiative that was started almost 2 years ago now at this point to look at what buying back the streetlights would cost and what benefit that would be to the communities. It was originally a joint initiative between a bunch of communities. It got picked up by the Energy Task Force at TCOG that existed at that time. It later became a shared service initiative, and it's kind of continued on in that form since. At this point, we have a bunch of communities. Almost every community in Tompkins County is looking at converting their streetlights over to LEDs. What really it comes down to is which way a community wants to switch their lights over. So there's two main ways in which a municipality can switch their streetlights to LEDs. The first one would be to go through the utility, to go through NYSEG in this case, and ask them to switch their streetlights, switch your streetlights over for you. As it currently exists, the town of Lansing leases their streetlights from NYSEG. That means every month, you pay not only a utility bill that consists of the energy charges, but also what are called facilities charges, basically the maintenance and the upkeep for the streetlights, which actually forms the predominant part of the bill. Under the utility tariff conversion option, essentially what you're looking at is paying NYSEG a small sum of money to switch those streetlights over to LEDs. At that point, you will pay a reduced fee in terms of facilities charges, and you will also pay less in energy because the LEDs are much more energy efficient than what's currently available in terms of high pressure sodium, mercury vapor, and so on. The other option is more costly. It's what's called the buyback option. And the buyback option consists of the municipality upfronting a bunch of money to NYSEG to buy back the assets, in this case the streetlights and the arms, and in some cases wires. And by taking on those assets, you're then able to convert them yourselves. So there's a couple of ways in which you can do that. You can have your town crew go up and do that if they have that experience. Most municipalities don't. So what they then do is they turn to a third party to do this for them. So there's a few different consultants that are doing this, including the New York Power Authority, NYPA. So in this case, NYPA has gone around to Tompkins County communities, has tried to aggregate them into a group and said, if you buy back your streetlights, we will help you out through that process. And then going through that process will then help you convert them over to LEDs, and we will also help you procure a maintenance contract. And by doing this as a collective, by doing this as an aggregated group in Tompkins County, we expect to see substantial savings. And so through both routes, you end up with streetlights that are LEDs. You end up saving on electricity. You end up saving on money. It's just a difference in terms of payback, in terms of total savings, and in terms of the control of the assets at the end of the day. So I, made basically a background handout here. It's about 2.5 pages for you to take a look at. It kind of lays out that first part that I just talked about, the kind of the two main paths that you can look at. And then right below that, kind of these two tables, we have the pros and cons of both going with the NYSEG option, which is that first table, or going with the LED buyback through NYPA. The second page, you'll see kind of what the current situation is. It lists, where the communities in Tompkins County are going, which ones are going with NYPA, which ones are still kind of considering their options, and which ones either already have LEDs or going a separate route. And then it also kind of gives you some next steps as well as future steps that we're kind of looking at right now. And so I wanted to make myself available, as I have with every other municipality, to answer any questions that you might have, to kind of provide what reassurance I can in this process. But before I kind of open it up to questions, I do want to make it clear that I do not work for NYPA, I do not work for NYSEG, I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension. I don't have a vested interest in which option you decide to go with, whether it is with NYPA, whether it's with NYSEG, or whether it's through some other way. So I am a non-partial third party. I'm just here to hopefully help you change the LED. So with that, I'll kind of open it up to whatever questions you might have.
I have a couple of questions.
Please.
Mostly related, the pros and cons are very obvious.
Yeah.
Between municipal control and prices. What about user-friendly, the person driving on the street? Is there any noticeable difference?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So with NYSEG, you're basically going to get the option of switching your streetlights over to either 3,000 Kelvin or 4,000 Kelvin lights, and you'll be able to choose the wattages that are in different places. So you will have some measure of control. With NYPA, because you're buying your assets, you're going to have a greater amount of control. You will be able to look at different colors outside of that 3,000, 4,000 Kelvin spectrum. You will be able to have a little bit more control if you go with certain options that they provide in terms of dimming, which will allow you to control whether you want to dim lights in certain areas or make them brighter. So it gives a little bit more flexibility than NYSEG. But in both cases, you're probably going to end up in a situation that it's going to be easy for the community to have a pretty seamless transition, I would hope. The only other thing to consider is if there does happen to be a problem that arises, because you do own the assets, if you buy them back, there will be an easier chance to address any issues that do arise. With NYSEG, you will have to be contacting them, asking them to make a switch out to see if they're willing to make out that switch. So there's that.
Any questions? Doug?
So the buyback through NICEAG, they would control the maintenance of the system?
Yeah, so with the NICEAG option, you are just basically paying them a relatively small amount of money, especially compared to the buyback option. You're paying it to them basically just to pay off the life cycle of whatever lights are already up there right now, and then they're going to switch your lights over to LEDs, and they'll continue to control the assets. They'll continue to do all of the maintenance that they already do. So for some municipalities, they really like that idea, especially municipalities that don't have a lot of streetlights. But for some others, in Tompkins County, we've heard that having NICEAG control the maintenance of the streetlights hasn't always been to their advantage. It's been long periods of time with lights being out and then not switching it over, and so they like the idea of having a little bit more control.
So then, if we went the other way, then it would be in the town's control to change our lights.
Yeah, so it would be the town would own the asset, so if the light went out, it would be up to the town to make sure that it was being switched out. And so the ways you can do that is either through a maintenance contract that's been procured, either by yourself or by NIPA, or by hiring, or having people on your own staff that can do that work. And so that would involve, having a bucket truck and then having, personnel on staff that would feel comfortable working around high voltage wires for the most part and have the certifications necessary to make some of those switch outs.
I don't trust NICEAG. Okay. I'm all set.
I'd actually like to hear Cricket chime in, because if we're gonna have somebody doing any of that work, his crew's gonna be the one, and I haven't heard your opinion on this yet. I know you do have one.
Well, I guess for starters, I think it's important everybody realize that New York Power Authority really is just a company like NICEAG. So it's not, it's been kind of floated out there, like I think a lot of people have the perception that this is like a New York State type thing. So at the end of the day, I guess it remains to be seen. NIPA possibly is no better than NICEAG. So, at the end of the day, the amount of lights that we have, I'm not sure that really doing the buyback itself is really a good option for us. I've been trying to gather some information, and I actually met and talked with a fellow today a little bit about some of our options there and stuff on it. So, I'm still trying to navigate through it. This has been CJ and I talked about it a little bit. Just trying to hear all the viable options and then trying to make the best decision that at the end of the day is going to be in the best interest of the town of Lansing and our lighting districts.
So you don't yet know what that option, you haven't formulated an opinion on the option.
Correct. So, like I said, it's just, I guess, weighing out the costs of the buyback itself. And then I guess my personal opinion would be that if we were going to do that, I'm probably not interested in a contract with NIPA. We've got multiple, local businesses that do this sort of stuff that I think we'd be way ahead if, we could just contract with them. So like I said, at the end of the day, this all sounds great, and I know the governor wishes for shared service and stuff, but the conception's out, or the perception's out there that NIPA is like affiliated with New York State, and it's just, they're a company like New York State Electric.
So to clarify something, so NIPA is a nonprofit. So they do have some affiliations with the state. They're kind of a quasi-governmental organization. They're not a privately held company like NICEAG. They don't have investors and shareholders like NICEAG. Right. So they are a nonprofit that does dictate in some measure, the amount of revenue that they can earn and how these projects pencil out. With NIPA in their plan, their hope is to not do the maintenance themselves. They want to procure a maintenance contract on behalf of the municipalities in Tompkins County. So from what we've heard from other municipalities, they've made it clear that they would prefer that be a local and regional contractor. The maintenance contracts themselves are probably going to look at, somewhere between either 1, 3, or 5 years with the possibility of opt-outs. So the one thing to consider if you do buy back your streetlights is that at some point, you will have to either procure your own maintenance contract or go through, NIPA to procure another maintenance contract. And so, the concern that I have heard from some municipalities, and maybe it was you that brought this up when we talked about it, is if the maintenance contract right now is at a pretty low price, what's the guarantee in 5 years, 10 years that those maintenance contracts are still going to be, relatively cheap compared to having NICEAG do the maintenance? That's definitely an unknown. When we look at kind of what I listed in the cons for the buyback, there's obviously what you know, what you don't know, and what you don't know that you know, or don't know. And so this is definitely one of those examples where we just have no idea, what a maintenance contract might look like in 10, 15, 20 years. So it is definitely something that you want to consider before making any decision, especially if you have a highway department that doesn't want to take that on, which the vast majority of municipalities in Tompkins County, their highway department has no desire to take on the maintenance of streetlights, which is completely understandable.
Any more questions, Joe?
Yeah, if we were to choose to go with NIPA and we get a 3 or 5 year contract, and the contract comes up, could we go back to NICEAG? And vice versa, if a few years from now we decide we're tired of NICEAG, is there the ability to opt out of that? So, how strong is this decision right now? Are we making it forever, or are we making it for 3 to 5 years and can revisit and go in a different direction?
No, that's a good question. So if you were to buy back your streetlights, that basically will sever your relationship with NICEAG when it comes to streetlights. You're not going to be able to go back to them in 3 or 5 years and say, oh, hey, will you come back and take over the maintenance of our streetlights? There's no process in place from the state and from the joint utilities to be able to do that at this point in time. Could regulations change in the future? That's possible. I doubt it, though. On the other hand, if you do decide to convert your streetlights to LEDs through NICEAG, and then, pay that small amount, and then in a few years from now, you're like, you know what, this really isn't working out with NICEAG, we want to buy back our streetlights, there will probably be a mechanism to do that. I think the mechanism probably exists right now. What your buyback price will be at that point in time will probably be substantially larger than it is now. Your buyback price that you'll find that you're getting from NICEAG at this point in time is for generally pretty old assets. Some of the lights that you have up right now are from 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, and then into the 2000s. So they're gonna, a lot of their lifetime, has pretty much been expended at this point, so you're not paying very much to reclaim those assets. If you have NICEAG put up all brand new LED infrastructure, they will make you pay for that infrastructure, and it's not going to be cheap. I mean, even the infrastructure that's pretty old isn't cheap. So if it's going to be new, it's going to be substantially more expensive. So it will be an option. Whether at that time it'll still be a good option remains to be seen.
Doesn't sound like a good option now.
It's a tricky part. NICEAG and the Public Service Commission dictates how this buyback process goes, and they've decided on a process that really empowers the utilities and allows them to establish rates without a lot of oversight. There is the ability to challenge it with the Public Service Commission and what they're charging you. It's a lengthy process. I think most people want to go through it.
That's the point.
Exactly.
So,
What is our timeline for this? When do we have to make our decision?
So the first round of municipalities that are going to go with NIPA have basically already signed up and had a kickoff meeting. So there really isn't a secondary timeline. It's just basically looking at if there's going to be a second wave of municipalities. There might be a timeline in the future, but that hasn't really been established. Casey at NIPA would probably have a better answer for you than that. I think he still thinks that municipalities that join in the relatively near future can probably be seamlessly integrated into the ongoing process. But that's very much more a NIPA question that I can answer.
So NIPA hires or provides their own contractors, or is that?
So the NIPA
subcontractors.
Yes. So the NIPA plan is essentially what they're going to do is they're going to work with a design firm. I can't remember what the name was. They were here the other day. They're out of Albany or Saratoga Springs. They're basically going to use that design firm to design what your new system is going to look like, and through that design firm, hire a company to come out and actually do the work of installing all of the LEDs with all the municipalities that they're working with. And then they're going to look for a secondary contract to essentially procure maintenance, what maintenance there's going to be. And then what NIPA is providing is NIPA has a contract for a lot of lights. They bought a lot of lights back, a few years ago, so they've procured a lot of cheap bulbs, and they're going to provide the equipment in terms of the bulbs. And then they're also providing some of that project management services, so they do take a cut for doing that.
Questions?
Just one more. There's the information about the smart cities
Yeah.
controls, and I was wondering if you could just touch on that a little. I know the Power Authority NIPA offered something where you could kind of log in and kind of see, tune your lights a little bit, and maybe there was some snow and ice detection, but I'm just wondering if NICEAG will offer
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So NIPA right now is trying to sell, municipalities also on this idea of smart cities and adding equipment to the streetlights that can do various different functions. The basic function that they want to offer communities at least is to have connected streetlights, so that if a streetlight goes down, it's connected to a hub that will essentially automatically notify whoever the town wants. So it'll notify the maintenance contractor, it'll notify the highway crew, maybe someone on the town board, maybe everyone on the town board, that the street light is out, and will also, what they've said is they normally procure maintenance contracts that the light will get, changed out within 10 business days, and that'll already happen because the maintenance contractor will know because of this smart city hub. Something that they haven't been completely forthright on is that if you want to get a maintenance contractor through them, you will have to do at least that level of smart city option, which is something that I didn't realize until we had our kickoff meeting. So I think that's something to be well aware of. The other things that they're promising is a greater level of smart city control. They have a whole lot of things that might entail. He's mentioned some snow and ice things to me as well, internet connectivity. I'm not really sure about all of that. Some municipalities will be interested, some of them won't care at all. But we do know that at this point in time, NICEAG is not offering that. Is it possible that in the future NICEAG will offer that? Absolutely. If they are, it's probably going to be a few years down the line. NIPA's big selling point for the smart cities and with having so many smart controls is also the control of the light itself, so that you can dim the light or turn it up brighter. And their belief is that in a couple of years, the Public Service Commission will tell NICEAG that if communities are dimming their lights, then NICEAG will have to basically reimburse them for the times that they go down in power or if they go up in power, vice versa. NIPA believes that this is going to happen in the next 2 to 3 years. It's not in any rate tariff filing as of right now, so if it's going to come out in the next 2 or 3 years, it's going to have to appear in a rate filing basically in the next year and a half. So my personal opinion is that's probably going to be a little bit of a longer timeline, but NIPA does say, if you have that in place, you'll be able to take advantage of it from day one instead of having to then buy the equipment and install it at that point and incur the greater cost. So does that answer your question?
It says here that the Village of Groton and the Village of Lansing have already switched. Do they own their streetlights, or are
Yes.
they both own their
They
streetlights?
both own their streetlights. So the Village of Groton, because they're a municipal utility, have always had control of their streetlights. They don't really have any affiliation with NICEAG. The Village of Lansing has told me that their streetlights are all LEDs, so as far as I know, they bought and switched them over. NICEAG, to my knowledge, hasn't converted any LEDs through their utility tariff program in this other tier at this point. So,
Do you know how many lights, what the cost was for the Village of Lansing to switch this over?
I do not.
I think we have, 60 streetlights?
I thought it was 80.
68. Is that 68 lights?
Yeah. So I'm
Do you
not
know what
sure.
the cost of that if you were to do option 2, what the cost of that would be to the taxpayers?
So this gets difficult because all of these agreements are subject to non-disclosure agreements. So I know how much they've spent in other municipalities. Plan on like a round figure of $400 to $500 per streetlight,
So $34,000.
plus some administrative fees on top of that. I would maybe guess closer to 45 or 50.
$50,000 that we ask the taxpayers to pay, and with that formula still, let's say hypothetically it's $50,000.
And that's just to buy back your streetlights. That's not to then convert them to LEDs, which would be an additional cost on top of it.
And I wonder how much that costs.
So that's a great question. So if you want to go the NIPA route, Casey has provided all the other municipalities basically a couple of different options that lay out the finances. NIPA's big thing is they'll offer financing so that it'll be cash positive from the beginning. Some municipalities are interested in that. Some others, like the town of Ithaca, says we'll procure our own financing. Thank you. Going the NICEAG utility conversion route, I'm not going to lie. If you go that route to switch out your 68 streetlights, it'll probably be $5,000 or $6,000. It'll be significantly cheaper to go that route.
So let's suppose in 5 years LEDs are out and you got a brand new game. Something meant something else. Where's your payback? Because after all, technology nowadays, this is the hot ticket, right?
Supposedly, so LEDs, if you look at kind of the technology curve where energy's gone, they've somewhat kind of plateaued. We haven't seen them gotten much more efficient in the last couple of years. That's not to say that something brand new couldn't come out. Somebody was telling me the other day about a super efficient incandescent bulb, so we might be returning to incandescent bulbs in the future.
Which would be wise. Personal opinion, just my opinion for the board. Obviously, we don't expect to make a decision tonight. I would like to be able to crunch some numbers that are accurate, to go back to our taxpayers and say, it's $50,000 plus, and okay, let's estimate what the payback period is. It may not be 7 to 10 years, it might be 15 to 20 years. At the same time, the first option would be, okay, NICEAG, switch them over, have a nice day without us, and moving forward on there, because saying, I think those numbers would be illuminating, that's my gift to you, illuminating to find out where we are with the payback and everything else.
Yeah.
Is there any way we can collect that data without giving away any type of confidentiality?
Yeah, so, I can't remember or not if you've asked NICEAG for a buyback proposal. I think you might have. So if you've asked them for a buyback proposal, you will already have their figures for how much it would cost to buy them back. The next stage then would maybe be to talk with NIPA and Casey, have him sign the non-disclosure agreement as well, so he can look at your numbers, and then he can run you a report on what it would cost to go through NIPA and what the payback period would look like for them. And then I would also contact NICEAG directly and say, hey, we're strongly considering the NICEAG tariff option. Can you provide us a spreadsheet on what it would look like to convert through that option and how much it would cost? And so they've been able to provide other municipalities with basically a spreadsheet. And that typically isn't subject to a non-disclosure agreement, so you'd be able to discuss that pretty openly and freely.
I would also be interested in finding out what Groton and the village of Lansing are doing in terms of maintenance, how much that's costing, how they're doing it, to get a real basis of this is what it's costing, people are doing it right now.
Yeah, I mean, it's, as Katrina was saying, the second mouse in this discussion. Anyways, we still had some data, obviously, to collect, I think, in my opinion. Ask those questions, obviously. Perhaps by our next meeting, we might be able to share information in between there, find out what the board's information would be, and come up with a decision maybe by our next meeting. If not, it might be October. If we're looking at anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000 for our taxpayers to pay, I would like to have some more definitive parameters so that you can justify it or not.
And I'll say that for my part, I'm more than happy to come in and discuss anything. I'm fairly certain I've signed a non-disclosure agreement to see Lansing's numbers. So I'm happy to discuss that in a setting that would allow that, and also to talk about anything else, in terms of the LED conversion. I mean, it's not something we talked about right now because we're focused a lot more on kind of the financial aspect of it, but we do know that a lot of residents have questions about, what it's going to look like to switch over to LEDs, how it might affect, human health, how it might affect, bird and bug populations as well. And so that's another thing that, we as Cooperative Extension are trying to get in front of it and make sure that people are informed ahead of time. So we're happy to do that in the future as well.
I understand that every municipality is different.
Yes.
And one would say, oh, this is the best thing. Well, okay, if you have 5 lights, I suppose it might keep up. Once again, I get concerned when the estimate is 7 to 10 year payback.
Yeah.
If you're in for $100,000, how much would you really save? And I'll let the numbers kind of dictate which way you might or might not go. That's up to the board to decide also. So I guess what the action plan would be for right now is to maybe work with CJ, myself, and ours will share information back and forth with the board members what we can.
You gotta talk to the village of Groton and find out what, because I'm really interested, because there's 2 halves of this. There's, the putting in the streetlights themselves in that process, and then there's the secondary maintenance. And, it may be that option 2 is a good option, assuming a good maintenance contract, but if we're only talking 5 years.
I can do some digging on that front and try and I know both of those municipalities pretty well, so I can reach out to them.
And again, that might be an option for intermunicipal cooperation, if we're just expanding an area, maybe we all can do the same maintenance contract and save a little bit of money by combining all our bulbs together. So, I'd be interested in really seeing that, because I think that's an important element of the payback. Given a 5-year contract, that's not very long.
I mean, that was one of the original considerations when this all started, was that with the city of Ithaca switching out their 2,000 plus bulbs, that, they'd be hiring people on their staff to be doing the maintenance themselves. They wouldn't be hiring this out to a third party. And there was early discussions of Ithaca, contracting or having an agreement with us, outlining municipalities on basically a time and materials contract. That might still be an option that could be pursued.
Do they currently do that?
So they're in the process of switching their streetlights to LEDs, so they don't,
They're on their own maintenance, they have their own maintenance.
they don't currently own their streetlights yet. They're in the process of buying back their streetlights, but they've already committed to when they buy back their streetlights, they will buy back their streetlights.
Nice.
They're buying them back from NICEAG and just kind of going their own route. They're the outlier in all of this because they have so many of them. They see substantial savings by just going their own line.
They're going a different option now, they're going through
They're not even
they're
going
going on
their
their
own.
own.
Yeah.
I understand.
Okay.
I think we covered a lot tonight, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
The way it is, we're listening to her, she can scoop, and we'll do the resolution.
Okay.
Main thing, again, we'll get her at ours, we take a page.
We don't need to, we're all on the same page.
But I want to get her, I'm very sensitive of people coming here.
I understand. I would not have put the order of this like this.
It was over here 323.
Was it stop it? We're back live?
I'll stop it with my cold one.
Bring it back?
I'm okay.
Bring to go.
Are you okay, resume?
Yep.
Okay.
Back on.
So, we now have, that's okay, whenever you're ready. We now have the privilege of the floor. I have two people that have signed up. Tian Hunter and is it Quine? Yep. Okay, does anybody, if anybody else wants to exercise the privilege of the floor after these two, please feel free to do so. So the first one is Tian Hunter. So, Tian, good to see you again.
Nice to see you, thank you. And I'm here just quickly to voice support and to thank you for putting Resolution 19, or Agenda Item 19, the resolution supporting Tompkins County Water Resource Council's staff request for dedicated personnel to water quality issues. I wanted to also say thank you on behalf of Cindy Brock and Liz Thomas, who've been involved in drafting this letter. This is stated quite simply, not having a county level staff person dedicated to water quality issues is a real lost opportunity at this point. There's a lot of state attention on water quality issues. There's a lot of money being offered for water quality projects. And there used to be county personnel dedicated to water quality issues. I don't know if any of you were involved in public life when Kate Hackett was here, but she was with the county, and when she left the county, this position was either retired or just simply not filled. But I think it is time to reinvigorate that position. For myself, I am chair of the Cayuga Lake Watershed Intermunicipal Organization. Next week, we are beginning a New York State Department of State funded project to advance the recommendations of the watershed management plan for Cayuga Lake. Again, another state funded document. And the objective of this upcoming project is to prioritize and advance 5 to 6 large water quality protection or improvement projects. And as I'm sure you have firsthand experience with, holding the contracts for these projects is a huge administrative task. And it would be a great benefit, I think, to all the small municipalities within Tompkins County to have some dedicated staff at the county level to help with grant writing, grant administration, and the coordination of projects.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next one is Mitch Quine. Hello.
Hi, how's it going? Thank you. So my name is Mitch Quine. I'm with a company called CS Energy. tonight. One, to just kind of introduce ourselves and our company, and secondly, to just discuss the current draft of the local solar law you guys are discussing. So CS Energy, we're a national solar developer and installer. We've been very active in New York State the past few years with the new green energy initiatives that have been going on. To date, across the country, we've installed more than 700 megawatts of solar projects. We're consistently ranked among the top 20 solar installers in the country. So we are experienced developers and builders of projects. We're very interested in development in Western New York, Tompkins County, and town of Lansing specifically. I think we've identified there's some good opportunity here for a lot of different reasons to develop a good beneficial project. We've been aware that you guys are working on a draft revision to your laws related to solar and wind energy. I had a chance to see an early draft of that. There was a public information session. We provided a few comments based on our review of that draft, some things that we felt would be barriers to entry for developers who would be discouraged by some of the provisions of the law. Had a chance quickly to just review the draft that was available tonight. I think a lot of those comments have been addressed, and just wanted to kind of speak from a developer's perspective, our support. We think that it's a workable law in its current form, and we'd be happy to work under it to develop something and find a partner with the town of Lansing. So we also just wanted to let you guys know that we're in the area, and if there's any questions about solar energy, solar development, I think CJ has my card, and I'm happy to answer any questions that come up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
That takes care of the two people that have signed up. Does anybody else want to exercise from the report? If not, we'll close that session. Move on to item 7, which is the Lansing Community Library report from Christine Eisenhuth. That's in our packet. And next comes the Lansing Youth Services report with two of my favorite people. We have Janice Johnson and also Travis Judd.
Hi, guys.
Why, hello.
We'll be quick. I'm the one that writes your lovely monthly reports.
Nice to see you.
Short and sweet. So I'm Janice Johnson. I work for the Tompkins County Youth Services Department, and I'm on vacation. That's why I'm dressed like this. But for Lansing, I'll drive up here from Trumansburg. I provide technical assistance for all 8 of youth commissions around the county, and I can tell you guys you have one of the best, and I do not say that to everybody. As a matter of fact, some municipalities I'd like to annex to Tioga County. But I have with me Stacy Maston, who is our chair this year, after Carolyn Shaw has been on chair for 10 plus years. Travis Judd, our program educator. He just got back from a long backpacking trip, but managed to get here anyway. And one of his participants, Grace. So I will let Stacy start, and then Travis and Grace.
So I would like to just say thank you for your continued support of our program. I think as rich of a community as we have in sports and theater and all these other things, the program that Travis runs for us really hits a population of students that don't fall into theater or sports, or kind of that mainstream. He does an amazing job of capturing the attention of those students and getting them to continue to be part of his programs and experience new things that they otherwise would never be exposed to. So I think that's incredibly important and a valuable enrichment opportunity to our students in Lansing. And I just want to say I've been part of the program I think for 4 or 5 years as a supporter. Prior to that, my son took advantage of many of those programs, and I could see both, firsthand as a parent, the impact that has, and now continue to see the impact as a participant of the advisory committee. So thank you for your continued financial support.
Hello, I'm Travis Judd. I would also like to say thank you. I absolutely love my job. I have so much fun. Like Jan said, I got back from a backpacking trip trip today. It was an absolute blast. We did about 10 miles in 2 nights. The rain held off, so it was wonderful. Yeah, so I do the after-school programs during the school year, and then during the summer we run full-day programs for Lansing middle school students. I also oversee the youth employment program, where we place students with the local library. In high school, also assisting media program. So it's all a really fun time for me. I get to do a lot of different disciplines. I'm trained in physical education. However, I love branching out and learning new skills to teach these students that they're interested in. Yeah, it's really fun, and they're learning as well. So just some examples of programs. We've got outdoor adventure program. We do cooking programs, arts and crafts programs, science-based programs, board game-based programs, video game design and coding, Legos. So we get a wide range of activities for students. And one of the programs, or I think 2 of the programs that Grace is here that's going to highlight, excuse me, one of them is called Sky's the Limit, which takes place over the summer. It's all about space and flight. And then we also have our program called Salmon Creekers, which is a biology-based program looking at the space right behind the middle school down at Salmon Creek. I think that's the main gist of it. And I'll let Grace take over here. I talk about her experience in the program. We've got something to pass out for you as well.
All right, so I've done many Travis's programs, but some of my favorites are definitely Sky's the Limit, which I just did in Salmon Creekers a little while ago. Sky's the Limit, we did lots of traveling, and first we went to Smith at Cornell, which is the science building, space science building, and we had very in-depth presentation about the latest technologies, or just anything really space related. And we went to the Soaring Museum in Big Flats, and we got to see gliders take off and completely learn how they work. And then we also went to Ithaca Airport. We got to go up into the tower and see all the private jets, and we got a private tour, and it was really incredible. And then on the last day, we built rockets, and that was very interesting. So multiple of them did get lost. We did get to build our own, which is completely design them and then launch them. It was a really great program. And then a while back, during the school year, I did Salmon Creekers, which is completely into biology, and I love that kind of stuff. And we studied the water samples and found that the water in Salmon Creek is very water. There's lots of life in it and everything. And we made our own guide to the life around Salmon Creek. And you've seen the page that Travis just passed out is the one that I made on Coyote, because we found some droppings on like the first or second day. And it's just so cool. It's great.
Yeah, so we're creating a guidebook for Salmon Creek of flora and fauna that the students have encountered, and this is their interpretation and documentation of it. We're also living in these field guides and identify what they encounter.
This is great, I really enjoyed this.
You too.
Yeah, I love seeing this kind of stuff. I listen to the radio like every night because I live in the Salmon Creek Valley and they let me there.
So I just want to point out, most of the programs, our main goal is to teach life skills to young people, but we can't write a program that says, come build your self-esteem. So we have to, make the program, and they are exciting, and we make them sound exciting, but the underlying theme of all these programs is to build skills in young people so that we become healthy, productive citizens in the future.
And, your funding helps us offer that at no cost. And so we don't have to charge money for students to participate in the program. We do ask for donations. We try to do fundraising on our own to support and supplement some of that. Our summer programs we do have a charge for, but we're certainly willing to talk to people. We have some funding to supplement, but if you look at the cost of those summer programs and the value that you get out of them, they're very reasonably priced for parents to be able to afford in a full day.
These sound wonderful. I wish they were around when I was a kid. It's really beautiful programs, all the ones you described, and so this one kind of catches my heart. Even that they sound great. I'm really excited about them.
Yes,
So-
I think when they get done, I would love to publish that, and have it available
There you go.
here at the library, and that might be partly a fundraiser for us.
I think that'd be fun.
So Patrick, we have a grant, don't we, that helps fund some of that money for the youth service, is it the community council? No.
You get money from Tompkins County Youth Services Department, and we provide those funds to municipalities as a matching grant, and we also get United Way funds
So,
and state funds.
question I ask you, as I ask all the people I have lunch with, is what's your dream project that you would want to do but haven't had either the money or the staff to do it yet? Is there anything out there? Because Lansing doesn't mind going in uncharted water. So,
Well, I don't know what you guys would say. I would say it would be really great to have their own van. Because right now, the van is located down in Ithaca, and Travis has to drive to Ithaca, drop his car off, drive back, drive all the kids home, then drive the van back, and then drive back to get his car. If that can't be done, one of my other, you don't ever ask me that question, then. I don't know if you guys get gas, like if the highway department gets gas cheaper than just going to a regular pump that has less taxes. Because if we can fill up our van with cheaper gas, that would be very helpful too.
well, you definitely got the juices flowing.
Now, and I don't know what Travis or
I haven't thought to dream yet. I'm just having so much fun with what I do. That would be one. I mean, having a van would be absolutely incredible. We do have great resources here that we utilize. We utilize Myers, we utilize Salmon Creek. We've been up to Ludlowville. However, to be able to travel regularly and not have to try to juggle who has reserved the van for this week and that week, that would be really a dream. Yeah.
So one of the things that we do, being president of the Lansing Community Council, is that we may not be able to go through Lansing, town of Lansing, but maybe we can go through Lansing Community Council in other ways, because we're also 501c3. Obviously, those dugouts are donations. There's no reason why we can't entertain other thoughts for the community. This falls under our mission statement. So the reason I ask these questions is because it may not be A or B that's the answer, but maybe we have C or D. So once again, keep the dialogue going. It's not a matter. Sometimes these are the right answer. It's just the wrong time to do them, or maybe it's the right time to do them. So you give us a budget as far as cost of the van, what type of van, that type of thing. Also, how much miles you use a year. Give me an estimate of that. Give me an estimate of how much fuel you use, and start the conversation going with other entities. And who knows? Sometimes these things happen before you know it. I'm not going to guarantee you anything, but I'm going to try. Okay?
You got it.
Having said that, would we use for Lansing, or would you use it for, necessarily, would you use it for what area? Would you use it for the
Well,
park?
it would only be used for Lansing youth to travel, but they would travel all over the place.
All right. This food for thought. We'll start the conversation. Does the board have any other questions or comments before we move on? I'm glad you all showed up.
Thank you very much for having us.
Okay. Let's move along. I know we'll get a brief statement from Mr. Sigler, Michael, from Tompkins County Legislator. Hi, Mike.
Hey.
How was your plane flight?
It was great. I got to see Rocco's new buildings.
Yeah.
From the air.
From the air.
But no, it was really nice. Funny, got up to Oswego because there's a restaurant there.
Yeah.
Restaurant closed 6 days ago. But the guy loaned me his car, so we went to another diner. So it was good. So thanks for having me again. I want to thank Marcia Lynch too, because her reports are vital for this report. I draw very liberally from those. Start out with our August 6th meeting. I was on vacation, but I know what happened, so I'll tell you all about it. The legislature voted against moving ahead with an in-depth feasibility study to gather more information on the potential to establish a joint co-location between the the county sheriff's department and Ithaca PD. I was against this from the get-go for the simple fact that there were a lot of restrictions, frankly, for my PD. It had to be in the city. And it was interesting, when I first started out, I said, well, I don't really need a study to tell me where you're going to put it. You're going to put it right down there on Route 13, over in the flats, because that's where all the land is. And sure enough, that's where they picked over by Harbor Freight. And frankly, there was a lot of other stuff going on with this. You know, they were talking about building a new jail. I'm like, well, that's the first I've heard of that. We just shot that down 2 years ago. And frankly, it's just different cultures too. I don't know why we'd want to yoke ourselves to the city when there's much lower hanging fruit. I mean, why not talk to Cuba Heights about maybe merging with them, maybe the sheriff's department, or Groton, village, maybe the village departments. But I mean, the city certainly has its own issues when it comes to policing. And I don't know. I just would much rather keep them separate. This was just a co-location of grants into the same building, but you can kind of see where it was going from there. Plus, it moves. This is where the development is, right? You don't plan for today. You plan for 20 years from now. It seems like the Northeast, you know, the Village of Lansing, Cuba Heights, that area, where, frankly, the city's building their buildings, that's where the development area is. That's where the population growth is. It's Lansing. The city's growing too, but if that's where your people are moving, why would you move your sheriff's department to the other side of town? It doesn't make a lot of sense. And frankly, the cost they were talking about was like $24 million to renovate Harbor Freight and then to build a new jail. I think we're talking $40 million. And that's the whole reason they picked that site, was to build a new jail. And we're like, we don't want a new jail. So that's where we went. It was shot down 5-8. You need 8 votes to pass anything. If it was, you know, if it was something I really wanted, I would have showed up. I would have come on vacation and voted for it. But when you're voting against something, you need 8 votes to actually get there. So I knew it wasn't going to pass. And Deborah Dawson and Sean Black, you know, your two. Deborah was definitely involved in that, was pushing against it as well. So it was nice to team up with her on that. And Sean Black was against it as well. Obviously a Northeast representative as well. And she was against it. For all the same reasons, you know, higher call volume over this area, you're melding 2 agencies, very different cultures, the pay scales were different. I mean, Legislator Black said it really just didn't make any sense, so, and I agree with her. Last night, however, the legislature did authorize a conditions and program needs assessment of the Tompkins County Public Safety Building. So we're going to look at the jail, we're going to look at the public safety building. We allocated $74,000 because there's no doubt that we need more room in the jail. Not more room for beds. I think we're pretty set on the number of beds. Politically, people don't want more beds up there. We're investing a lot in alternatives to incarceration to kind of get people out of jail. Jail is just, you know, you're only there for a year, and then you go to something bad, you know, worse than that, you're going to state prison. It's really just, we need to bring you in until your case is adjudicated. So we can do that without more beds, we think, and we've done so. We've definitely minimized the number of board-outs too that we're having. So, but we're going to study that. Maybe we move the road patrol into another building. You know, we're going to reconstruct up at the airport, the fire department up there. Maybe we move it in there. Maybe there's another building right next door to the sheriff's department that maybe we can use that. We're going to look at those different options, and we'll see again if we can move road patrol out of the jail. That opens up a lot of space that we can put in program space. You know, we can upgrade the medical facility inside of the jail, which is desperately needed. So that's kind of what we're looking at. We also heard public comments. This is something that keeps coming up. Well, came up 5 years ago. It's come up again. Maybe more than 5 years ago. About rifle hunting in Tompkins County. We're one of the few counties in upstate New York where you can't use a rifle to hunt a deer or a bear. The people that are experts in hunting say that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Shotguns are actually worse than rifles. Rifles are more precise. You know, you have a sight, you can see around you, they're safer. Some of the ricochet problems that maybe you used to have when you were a kid, the ammunition is much better than it used to be. And they make a pretty good argument as to why. It's not even so much why have it, it's a matter of why don't you have it kind of idea. So we will see where that goes. That's going to eventually come up for a vote. A couple people spoke out against it. There were more people that were just kind of against guns in general, against hunting, I think, in general. I will say the one woman said it's ridiculous to expect people to wear blaze orange when they walk through the woods. I can tell you that is not correct, actually. 80% of the people that are shot in a hunting situation are shot and do not have blaze orange on. So it actually does work, believe it or not. So I found that statistic remarkable when I took the hunter safety class. What else? So also at our August 6th meeting, we approved the adoption of the 2019-2020 Tompkins Cortland Community College operating budget. So it's a $35.7 million budget. They needed more money. We approved the 5%, and it's tough getting money out of Cortland County on this particular issue. But they agreed they're going to raise theirs 5% too. They are hurting for students. They've had a huge drop-off in students at TC3. So just so everybody's aware, good economy, fewer people go to college. I know that sounds kind of counterintuitive, but that's true. They've lost about 1,000 students. I mean, they went from like 2,500, I think they're down to 1,500. The dorms are kind of empty. They're trying to figure out what to do with the dorms that they built. So there's a lot going on there. But, we wanted to kind of shore up what they were doing over there at the college. Also, I just want to mention this. Somebody was from Trumansburg here before. We lost somebody from Trumansburg. Army Sergeant James G. Johnson from Trumansburg. He was killed in action in Afghanistan. Not sure if it was in action, but he was definitely on active duty in Afghanistan. He died on June 25th, 2019. Injuries sustained in service to his country. He was an explosive ordnance disposal specialist. Received many decorations, meritorious service, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Many of the legislators actually wore Hawaiian shirts. That was apparently his favorite outfit. And I just want to recognize he gave all for his country. Really appreciate that. Right there in Trumansburg. So that is it. So good things going on in the county. We're just wrapping up summer. We're going to start budgeting season in September. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully it will go easy. The OTRs are coming in over target requests. And, but I think it'll go pretty smoothly. We set a target back in April or May. I think we're going to stick with that.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
Short enough? Oh, and I did want to say one more thing. Travis is excellent. That's an excellent program. We've used it for myself. The nicest thing about it are twofold. It is a long day, although it'd be great if it went 9 to 5. I think it usually goes like 9 to 4, so that extra hour would be awesome, just for parents. But also very inexpensive. I mean, reasonable. We're talking like something like $25 for a week or something like that. So, or maybe $125, but they scale it too. I mean, they work with you, which is awesome, and it really is a great program. So, thank you. Next.
Okay, Park and Rec.
Hi, Pat. Good evening. I'll just reiterate, Travis is awesome. That program is really good. Unfortunately, we try not to have a lot of crossover between our programs and his, so we don't have duplications or stuff. So, but he does a great job. Helps us tremendously with high school helpers as well for our program. So, a couple things. I'll just go through them quickly. Soccer camp was huge last week. Huge success. Over 240 kids. As always, the weather was hot, but we took plenty of water breaks and had lots of sunscreen. So, I'm just gonna go through this quickly because I know cricket really wants to go. So. Sent you all an update on the digital sign. Hopefully you all have received that. Obviously there's a little more cost involved than what was expected. We tried to get it to where we think it should be, so hopefully you guys can talk about that later tonight. As far as parks, had to cancel last week's concert due to weather. Kind of their call more than ours, but we made the call and it ended up being the right call to cancel. The last concert will be tomorrow night, which is bad alibi. Unfortunately, with the parks, the last couple weeks, we've had some theft. So we're looking into maybe putting in a camera system. Talked to Ford's Marina today. They have a camera system there. So we're going to start looking into that a little more heavily. We'll have some quotes here for the next week or so. Any questions?
I think you're doing a great job. I love the summer program. I don't participate in it as much as I could, but I love seeing the kids out there playing. I love seeing our soccer fields and ball fields being used. And you guys are really utilizing it. That's a lot of people out there playing.
Yes.
And And then there's the unexpected things you get to do. We were supposed to have 9 volunteers today and had 1, so Parks and Rec kicked in and helped work on the project.
Salt Point?
Salt Point.
How was Salt Point?
It's jungle down there.
It's very warm.
We're in the process of putting in probably close to 75 total new trees and shrubs down there.
I had heard that there's one constituent, they're concerned because they're running out of space.
Running out of space.
Running out of space. I mean, this is one who was an advocate of that, obviously. And it's a nice problem to have.
Yes, that is a problem we have in most places within the town line, since we're running.
It is a peninsula. There's only so far you can go.
So, at some point, we need to make a decision on this LED sign. We have a $20,000 grant given us. If we don't use it this year, it'll go back. Price tag is $50,000 total, so it'll be $30,000.
That is correct.
And Patrick has researched it. He's got the 3 quotes. He did all the wax. We keep the regular sign. We retrofit it with the frame, put the new sign in. That would cost more. And what's the uses for it? You can sit here and you can just dial stuff in. You can change it. It'll roll. So you have multiple messages, within the hour, half hour. Another way to bring up the town up to the 21st century. At some point, when you want that technology, now we do have some money in the reserve fund, but we have other issues we have to do with our computers, right?
Correct, I was just going to say, unfortunately, Windows 7 is becoming obsolete. Dan knows this, I'm sure. So we have to upgrade several computers. I think we're in the 15 range of computers.
And in Patrick's defense, this came out of left field. There wasn't like an FYI 5 years ago.
Well, yeah, no, not 5 years ago, but it's recently reared its head and we have to do something. So,
Which is why we put money in that reserve fund.
We did. And so there's 2 ways to think about this. It's, okay, you have the reserve fund, and you have this pot of money left over, which we're pretty solvent. Okay, you take the money out of reserve, and then you put the money from the solvent back in the reserve, or you just do a fund balance and leave that money in there for something that's a critical emergency. That's for the board to chew on, hopefully by our next meeting.
yes, I hope. We have the quotes. I think you have them. So there's 2 options. We can re-image the computers. We can re-image up to 6, I believe it was, which is a process. I mean, the money is right there. It just makes more sense to buy new computers, in my opinion. Because the way technology changes, it's not worth it to try and re-image a few machines and save a few bucks when they might go bad tomorrow. So,
The sooner you have this money allocated, the sooner you can get started on it.
correct.
I'm not saying that, we save this for a rainy day. My opinion is starting to sprinkle. So, personal opinion is that we should move on this sooner than later, because we're going to have to address it anyways.
Yeah. And I can email the rest of the board those quotes so you can
Yeah,
see
because
them.
I don't think I saw the computer quote, I saw the signboard quote.
They're all, so the computers are all state contracts, so I want to say it's the $15,000 to $20,000 range.
So timetable, can you wait till our next board meeting for us to decide
Yes.
about this? Because
Yes.
worst case scenario, if we do nothing, we'll just go dark, right?
We will not go dark, it's not unsupported, it's unsupported. It still works, but you open yourself up to a lot of potential risks.
Like ransomware?
Malware, lots of security issues. So,
Okay.
the blue screen that answers.
We all know what happened to the Lansing school, right?
Yes.
So the other thing is that when does the board feel comfortable to make a decision about the LED sign? Next September also?
I feel comfortable moving on it now.
I guess my only concern with this is if we only make grants or deciding how we spend our money as opposed to we decide how to spend our money. And I don't want to get into that position. If someone gives us 20 grand and suddenly we're spending 30, that someone else kind of pushing our board as to how to spend the community's money, as opposed to us saying, here's all the money we have in reserve, and here's the way we want to allocate it.
True.
True.
But it is saving us.
When we applied for the grant, we gave them that proposal, and gave them the dollar figures on this and where we thought it was gonna cost. And it was $49,000. So they said, well, we won't give you 0, but we'll give you 20. So,
I asked for 50.
yeah, so,
I got 40%. Just saying, and I'm not saying that to feel pressured, let me rephrase that then, rather than say 6, I'll say half a dozen. The fact of the matter is we have an opportunity to get a 40% discount on this. And to do that now would be something that, with that opportunity come again next year or not, I don't know.
I think that it's a time saving, so that's money saving there. And also, as you're transitioning to the computer signups, we need a way to remind the community stuff is coming, deadlines are coming. So
we
it's
can get
part of
information to the
efficiency.
public quicker.
It's efficiency.
We can get, like, the concert canceled, we can get that stuff out faster to the public. If there's a meeting, a special town board meeting, we can get that on sign.
And you can put multiple messages, not just, you're
Correct.
not limited to just the lines that you have. You can have
Correct.
rolling messages.
We had this discussion 3 years ago, remember?
We've had it several
So
times.
it's not really
And
just.
we had a good laugh then, but now it's to the point where we're trying to get to 20%.
And it's not just Park and Rec, so it is applicable.
Yeah. And you've done a lot of research on this, so it isn't like, you don't have LED envy, so you say, because everyone else has got it.
Oh, fire department's got one, I gotta have one.
That's right.
Can we get them to give theirs to us, since I know how to buckle my seatbelt, I don't need that from my
That's
car
right,
every
that's
day.
You're going to send them a note down to them.
How about if I request this, can we get a package with the signboard and the computers and do that all next month? Would that be an acceptable timetable, or do you need this now?
I would prefer to get the sign part done, because it's been quite a long process. I mean, we've had the money since.
And there'll be a backlog to get.
Yeah, and I don't know exact, I mean, 3 to 6 weeks is probably what it's gonna take to get the sign here, and then we have to have it installed, so we're talking weather and all that other stuff at this point in the year, so.
Now we're talking, it would be October.
Is that 50,000 include installation, or we just going to do that?
Oh, that includes installation.
And if we had a closed road, we can also.
Yes, it could
have,
be used
you know,
for any
townwide.
town
It's
message.
for any department.
Yeah, it's
Any
not
essential
specific to
town message.
Lansing Parks and Recreation.
And this is a wireless thing, so you just, as long as you have electricity out here, you can do it.
Correct.
We'll have electricity because we have our generator hooked up now.
Well, we already have electricity there.
Pardon me?
We already have electricity at the,
Oh, already, I'm sorry, that's what you meant.
If the power goes down, does the sign still work without generator, or is that separate?
that's a separate service.
When the power goes down.
Maybe we should give them a
One miracle at a time.
Here you operate your wish.
Cricket's got a
We remember we had that hogs and pigs conversation.
Cricket's got a portable one, we can use that.
That's right. That's right. So why don't we go with the, entertain a motion for the LED sign allocation. So
I'll second it.
any further discussion?
I just want to clarify that we're taking it from our fund balance, and how much are we taking?
Up to 30,000.
About 230.
Is that the proper way, given that it's a grant, we need to like?
No, the grant's 20.
So I understand we need to include the grant money and say an allocation of 50, if we're allocating money, some of it covered by grant, some of
Different
it covered
line.
by us.
I would just allocate the acquisition of the product for not more than 50,000 and allocate at least 30,000 to supplement the grant, just so you have the total cost
Specific.
on there.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
And 30 would come from, unencumbered or unreserved fund balance. 20 would come from the grant, and it includes installation.
And you have the line item for that, right, for the gifts, right? You'll have that line item, you can give it Jesse.
Yes.
So there's a grant, there's a line for grants somewhere.
Okay, any other comments?
Jesse's okay with this?
She's right as fast as she can.
I know, I don't want to wait until she's got it
That's
done, to make
okay.
sure she didn't miss something.
I think I can get it put together tomorrow. We're allocating $50,000 for the LED digital sign, 30,000 of it from the unreserved fund balance, and then 20,000 from the grant. And I'll work out all the other stuff.
I think it was up to 50,000, right?
Up
For the
to,
total,
okay.
total cost.
With installation. That includes installation, right?
Any further discussion? So the computer thing's all good for next month?
Who's
We
crossing?
can wait
next
till
week.
next one. I'll send you guys all the posters.
If for some reason you need to do something quickly,
4 computers.
if something happens, we have some contingency money, I think, for that.
Yeah, if something happens, the drop dead date, and correct me if I'm wrong, yeah, I think is January 14th for Windows 7.
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
If we really need to give us other fires, we need other fires. Because you know, if there's an issue coming up, call us, we can meet.
Yeah, I don't see one, and I've talked to the company we deal with
I
on a regular
understand.
basis, so.
Your crystal ball sometimes gets fuzzy.
Yeah.
If no further discussion, Mrs. Hall?
So I have Doug making the first and Katrina seconding the motion for the sign. All in favor?
Aye. You had a good night.
Thank you.
Yeah, then you're gonna top it, well, you know.
Thank you.
You bet. All right, now we got the main course coming up. Cricket, Highway Department report.
Good evening. Well, so to start off, we've got most of our paving complete at this point for this season. We've been working on some, I don't know, pretty major erosion stabilization of the Lake Watch area with a couple different streams and stuff that flow there. I shouldn't say streams, but ditches and stuff. The one thing I'll bring up, obviously, the resolution's on there for to authorize the bid of materials for the Trip Down Road project. And I see
Could you
that
speak closer to the mic? I'm not hearing that.
we've got the stuff coming up for the North Trip Down Road project there, so that'll be nice to get that under motion. We're in works with, obviously, Tompkins County Soil and Water to try to get some creek stabilization done in the Lockwood Hill area. Obviously, the permits are in. The project obviously is not a go until the permits are approved. At this point, the timeframe's kind of tight for this year because by the end of September, you need to be out. The request I had from Tompkins County Water and Soil, they obviously don't have a meeting until September 9th to get authorization to spend money. So for some reason, if the permits happen to come through next week or something, if the board would be comfortable fronting the money, so to speak, and then being reimbursed from Tompkins County Water and Soil. So this would be for, riprap, mainly just riprap at this point. So just that would be billed through the town of Lansing, and then obviously reimbursement from them. They have money earmarked for the project, but like I said, they can't just call Seneca Stone and start over riprap without their board's authorization. So,
Approximately how much do you think?
80 to 90,000.
Just the project built by Susie's house?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Local. You've been trying this for a few years, though, haven't you?
Yeah, well, this has kind of been really ramped up and on the last 2 years, but for the last several. we've been-
Remember, Jack French has mentioned this many years ago.
Right.
trying to get this done.
So we're at the point where the soil and water, has some money earmarked, obviously, with our conjunction of us doing the work, they'll be able to cover equipment costs and materials to get this done. So there again, it's just, if the board would entertain a motion to front that money for them, if this thing goes, just because the timeframe's gonna be tight. I mean, I guess I'll be honest, if we don't see the permits till, after Labor Day, this probably isn't gonna happen this fall, and then, I don't know kind of where it is. So, I mean, the push has been on. I mean, the DEC people have been great as far as trying to get this, fast track for us. They got through their stuff, got it to the Army Corps. We're waiting for the Army Corps to once they give their approval, it's back, then the DC will immediately give theirs, and this can happen, so.
Can you help me understand why you have a September 30th deadline? What's that?
So it's navigable waterways and so on and so forth, so I mean, it's just, you know.
The state rules that you're stuck with?
Correct, you know, it's kind of like dredging the creek, I mean, they give you this window and you gotta be out, so, you know, it's
the DEC rules, right?
Yep, but most of it, you know, surrounds, you know, revolves around, you know, the wildlife.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm just trying to
So,
understand.
no, that's the issue with that line. Yep.
So are you worried about the money disappearing if we don't get approval quickly enough?
No, I don't, I'm not concerned about the money disappearing because it's already been earmarked for that project. It's just a matter of if, it'd be nice to move on sooner than later, you know, because then again, if we don't get started this fall on, you know, potentially that puts us into next August to get a start, so.
Salmon Creek wants to move and you're trying to slow it down.
Right.
I understand, and, you know, a good spring rain could really move it a lot.
So I'll let you all on that, I guess. I mean, you know, obviously that's something you guys, folks can discuss.
Well, you need that tonight, right?
Well, ideally, yes. Because I don't personally have the money in my budget to cover it, so at this point, so.
We've done this before with other projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, it's, you know, and there again, I mean, contingent on spending the money, obviously, you know, kind of get some sort of confirmation from them that this is exactly what we talked about. Like I said, I had a couple emails with it, and, but like I said, I mean, that's how we're looking. I mean, we've never had issues before, so, there again. So you folks can discuss that at the board member reports, or however you want to do it.
Well, let me ask, do we want to pause and deal with this while it's fresh in our mind, or do you want to do it later?
No, our pattern of behavior is that when these things come up in the report, we address them right away.
Well, let's pause, if it's okay, let's pause you and deal with this right now.
Okay.
Otherwise, we might forget.
All right.
So it's 90,000 up to?
Yep.
Up to 90,000 reimbursed.
By Johnson County Water as well. Yes.
Already earmarked? Already earmarked?
Yes.
So
I'll second any question of where the money comes from. Do we have to state that in this kind of resolution?
If you're going to authorize spending $90,000, I would think yes.
So is there money in the highway fund that we can say yes to, or do we need to pull it from somewhere else? Do we need to loan the highway fund money, or?
Well, I mean, theoretically, you know, that, I mean, you're not really dealing, I mean, you are dealing with road infrastructure, so I mean, I guess I'd refer to Guy, but I would say it's more of a flooding issue, so obviously, you know, we look at it, a account. So I mean, I would recommend, you know, something maybe unreserved fund balance today, or.
Okay, Guy, what do you think? Does this sound like an A or a B?
If it's a creek stabilization and flood control project, then it's A.
Okay.
you'd be like, sorry.
So what would happen is this would come out of our unrestricted fund balance and go back in when the money comes back to us?
Yep.
And it's being reimbursed by Tompkins County Soil and Water.
Yep.
And you're only doing this contingent that you get the approval, right? Like whatever, or it comes in soon, or do I not need to include any of that?
I think the approval's from DEC, not from Soil and Water.
Correct.
Right, I realize the approval's from somebody else, but I just don't know, do I need to put that in the motion?
I don't think Perkins going to.
No, I think all we need is just if the board's willing to front the money for the project at this point if it goes. I mean, if the project doesn't go here
Then you're
next
not doing
week,
anything.
then
Correct,
the
okay.
reimbursement, you know, they'll probably be null and void because they'll have all their ducks in a row to
So-
place it. So everybody's trying to fast track to get this thing going. So.
Okay, so I've written down up to $90,000
Yep.
from the unrestricted fund balance reimbursed in all, full or whatever by Tompkins County Soil and Water.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Okay, so we have a.
And so I have Doug first,
Joe.
Joe second, all in favor?
Aye.
We knew you were.
All right, well, I'll let them know that's great, so I, you know, thank you for that. We obviously got our motion with the Woods Edge realignment. Hopefully, next week, that'll look totally different up there. Weather's been nice probably this week. Other than that, the only thing I guess I got left is, I guess I'd make a recommendation to the board to, I guess I'd say, just do away with the contract with Spec Consulting on the needs assessment for the highway barn at this point. I mean, we're 16, 17, 18 months in, and what I know now is the same thing I knew before we ever even talked to the fellow. So, I mean, it's unfortunate, but at this point, I mean, back in February, we had measurements, and we were gonna have all this stuff by, March, and then it was gonna be by the end of June or whatever, and here we are at the end of August, and I think it's just.
So this was some firm that offered their services or?
Well, yeah, so we went through this contract, I mean, we started April of 2018.
A long time ago.
It was for a needs assessment, looking at the highway barns, to put something together for the future, obviously, to look at, where to renovate or how we can save money energy-wise and stuff, and to this date,
We're not close.
I think it's just time to be done. I get more from that day having a conversation in 5 minutes than I've gotten from that in 18 months, so.
Have we given them any money at all?
So I think we,
I'll have to look at the contract.
I think it was $1,500 up front,
And a
and,
total of 5,000.
yep. It was okay.
So what we paid $1,500.
Paid $1,500, I mean, obviously, they did some measuring, they looked at a few things, they looked at the energy bills and stuff, so I mean, not saying they didn't do anything, but at this point.
They already got $1,500.
But they didn't do anything of value to us.
But we
That's
haven't,
the part.
yeah, they didn't produce anything that was part of the contract.
There's plenty of people who come out and measure a building for $1,500.
Can we get some money back since?
I don't know, I want money back. They're clearly not fulfilling the contracts.
So let me, once we get a scope of direction here, then I'll talk to our legal advisor to see what the options are moving forward on that.
Because this has been frustrating me for a while, and I know I've talked with you
Oh,
about
absolutely.
what's going on with it, and your answer is always, they're about to give us something. It's been like that for almost a year. They're about to give us something.
So as we have discussed with CJ, other options, one of the things we'll discuss in the future is to send out for a scope of work, amongst other things, 5-year plan,
The
whatever.
deadlines for pieces of it.
And also, there's some grant money available if we maybe word this right. Got our base one of the bullpen, we'll bring her in when we need that. And so now we're moving in a different direction. I think we've given this ample time. So the first thing I need from the board, if it sounds like we're moving in the same direction, is the authorization to cancel this. And then from there, we'll move on to in a different direction. Can I fire? Once we pass it.
Well, my only question is, I'm not sure exactly what canceling entails. Can we get some of the money back, can we not? And so,
This is a discussion with legal that we'll have after we decide on what direction to go in. Which is, if you want to cancel this contract, and then I will sit down with the contract and see what the options are.
Lack of performance.
no, I don't think we got that right.
And there is a specified time period that certain scope work will be done, obviously that wasn't done, so.
Are these dates that they provided document?
It's all in the contract. What I would like to do before we discuss this openly, I would like to get a direction from the board, and then I would like to talk privately with our council to see what the options are.
I'm comfortable to follow through on your suggestion.
No, that's all, I just wanted to put that out there, like I said, it's just been frustrating, it's just.
All right, so let's move this forward then. Who wants to do a motion?
I'm not sure exactly what the motion is.
To
How about to pursue canceling this contract?
cessation of the contract.
I would move that.
Okay, I got a movement from Joe.
I'll second.
A second, for discussion. This is all.
All in favor?
Aye. Okay, so, and from there, we'll see what the options are with legal, move forward on that.
Cricket, I got a question. I know Brickyard Road is a county road. I've got a couple of concerns on it. I don't know if you can help move those forward. One, I've seen bicyclists getting really hurt on that bridge, and I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to, when it's raining, they slip and they fall, and somebody got really badly hurt there a month ago or so. One of those big blue bicycles, one of them went over because their tire got caught in it because it was slippery. I'm wondering if we can ask the county to put signage up about the bridge really is not safe for bicyclists when it's wet.
I'm certainly happy to check with them.
And the other concern I have is they've been digging out the ditches there and they're not hydro seeding them, so those ditches are going to erode right into Salmon Creek, and I've got a concern about that.
Okay, I'll mention that. I mean, I know there's supposed to be hopefully some road reconstruction. I think they're still planning to do some paving there on that stretch of road, so, but I will certainly address that with them to see where they're at. So.
I appreciate it, because that's a really erosive area, and it's going to undercut the road.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, they use our place all the time to fill up their hydro seed and stuff, so I mean, I know they're on. I don't know if they're a little behind or what their deal is, but I'll pass that on.
Thank you very much.
Is there anything else to do?
I think I'm all good.
You are all good.
Depending on what the weather does to it.
Right, thanks.
Thank you.
Item 12, Director of Planning Reports, CJ Rand.
Good evening, everyone. Just want to preface this by saying today is my 100th day of full-time employment in Lansing. So, thank you very much. Just the highlights from the reports. Tomorrow I'll be sitting with Tompkins County Planning, GIS personnel to essentially do a big data transfer of all the town's spatial data from them. So Charmaine was kind enough to order me a big flash drive that I can go ahead and fill with spatial data, and that will be really, really fabulous to have all that in-house and be able to manipulate that data and really be able to see at a glance, what's going on.
Are you going to get into unique natural areas with that?
Yeah, I'll give a little update. So following up on that, we held our very first Conservation Advisory Council meeting on July 15th. It was a great success, I think. Everyone was really engaged, really great bunch. We kind of talked about some of our initial goals, as Joe mentioned about the natural resources inventory. That's something the CAC is essentially tasked with doing by statute. So we're going ahead and essentially starting that process off. We actually met just last Thursday as well for the second meeting, and we did a nice overview of some of the tools that are just available publicly to be able to see the kind of spatial data I'm talking about in a web viewer. Some of the tools essentially we can build on, just so people can familiarize themselves essentially with what's out there. So that's going really well. On top of that, T.G. Miller has been kind enough to share water and sewer data, which will be super valuable going into the future. So it'll be really interesting to kind of see how all these data layers start working together. So that'll be a lot of fun. So you may have noticed the Quality Sheds project. That is received site plan approval on July 22nd from the planning board. That's heard some concerns from folks about the existing building that remains on the property, and of course, once the code enforcement officer sees it fit to declare it an unsafe building, if it ever gets to that point, of course, I support that determination, which sort of leads me into a nice segue of the removal of 25 Sperry Lane. That has been completed. You should have received from Lynn a letter and some photos about that project essentially being completed. Project, I don't know if I classified as that, but the removal of the burned down single family home, so shall we say.
And the neighbors are very happy about that. I've heard from them as well.
Okay, that's great. And so I think the bill basically is coming due. I don't know if there's discussion about how the town wants to apply that. There is a fee essentially, or not fee, but there's a 50%, I guess, addendum, I don't know what you call it. A surcharge, yes, thank you. But I think there's some leeway in that in terms of what can be imposed. It's up to 50%.
There's a concern. I have a concern about that. And it's not because it's my brother's property, it's a concern from a legal aspect. Let me back up a minute here.
Oh, sure.
As far as the sheds go, I talked to Mr. George. He intends to remove that building probably in the fall.
Oh, okay. Excellent. That's exciting, okay.
Because he has come to the conclusion that probably won't be renovated, it'll probably be torn down. He'll probably want to sell says it's a safe building, and we have to go with that. So I use that into the 25 Sperry Lanes, not because of my brother's property, just for legal ease. One of the things that our attorney has recommended in the past is to go no more than 20 to 25% for the penalty on top of the cost to remove any type of building. The risk is that if it gets to court and we lose not only the $13,000 penalty, but the $26,000 cost to remove it. So keep that in mind when I understand this is the first one, at least I've been involved with. So that was illuminating when I heard that concern. And of course, Guy has said it in the past, but it's one of those things that you have to, it's been suggested, I'll put it this way, that we put it within a percent that can be defended in court. Otherwise, you risk everything if you lose. Is that correct? You can expand on that.
I'd like to hear that directly from Guy.
When that provision was originally written and the work that went into it, basically what you're doing is you're adding a surcharge to the costs of removal for the expenses that are easily calculable, but which nonetheless exists. Your administration and overhead. The miscellaneous expenses that a municipality would necessarily incur, it's just like any other sort of permit or fee or surcharge or whatever. You're trying to reasonably recover what your costs are, not exact a criminal penalty and not raise revenues, because you are preempted from using this tool for raising revenues. That you do under a budget process and a real property tax law. And if you want to find someone, you bring charges, civil or criminal. So the ballpark that, it was close, the ballpark that I told the town to stay in is the traditional 15 to 20% that has survived challenge after challenge for decades. And when I proposed 20% and I was asked by the then supervisor, well, can we make it 25? I said, if that's as far as you're going to go and you're willing to run that little bit of risk, you know, it's up to you. It's your decision as a board. They decided on 50%.
We're talking about writing a law.
Well, when it was adopted, it was written at 20%, they amended it to 15, and a prior board approved it.
Okay, I was unclear as to what you were saying.
A 50% surcharge, which I think is at least arguably penal and not based on what the cost of recovery is. So when I was looking at this issue recently, I did take the opportunity to remind that this has been an open issue for a long time. I brought it up when we started the code process and said, if we're going to codify everything, let's at least fix something obvious like that right off the bat. And of course, our first case would come in the gap. Isn't that the way it always happens? So my recommendation is to, although you have the right to collect under your local law up to 50%, I would really recommend you stay in the 20% range. And I provided to Lynn and to CJ, when we were looking at some of the questions, a traditional type of lawsuit that comes up in this scenario. And in this case, the reason that there's two steps whenever you try to create a tax, when you're authorized to do it, for instance, you can't add an unpaid speeding ticket to a tax bill, okay? But when you're specifically authorized by state law to add something to a tax bill, usually there's at least, especially if it's adverse, unlike like a water bill where they've obviously received a measurable benefit, there's two opportunities in due process to make a challenge. One is to challenge the need for the removal of the building at all. And the other is, someone could say, I agree the building needs to come down and I can't afford to do it, and so I'm not going to challenge you on that, but I'm going to challenge you on the cost that you're charging through. And so the representative case that I provided actually had to do with the fact where a municipality spent a few months going through the process and then declared an emergency and didn't go through public bidding channels. And the citizen challenged it and said, if it was required to be publicly bid, and it wasn't publicly bid under General Municipal 103, then it's not a legally enforceable or valid contract, therefore you can't collect on it. So and the lesson is that if there's any infirmity, they can challenge the whole ball of wax. And that was one of the concerns, always the concerns you have when you're dealing with things like citizen property rights, due process, attaching something like a tax to a bill that they may not anticipate, because in the long run, you may be divesting them of their property. And if we actually have an understanding of property, it involves the Constitution. So you want to make sure you have full notice and everything really fits neatly into the known bodies of law that allow this process. So my recommendation would be that you're allowed to go up to 50%. My recommendation would be that you try to stay at 20% as the surcharge. I don't think the overhead to the town actually justifies the huge numbers here. You're not supposed to make money on this process. You're supposed to be able to remediate the harm at minimum cost, both to the landowner and to the public. I think 20% or 15% is pretty standard. It would work in this scenario. It wasn't a highly complex project. The choice is obviously yours. It's legislative, and secondarily, I would definitely change the local law and bring it in line with what I think the requirements are, or authorize more research and see if someone's actually succeeded on something like a 50% number. I would highly doubt it, but you never know.
Have we passed the point where they can argue that we shouldn't have taken down the building?
Yes, that time frame would have expired.
That's a health and safety.
Right, I mean, can I say that that challenge would not arise, or that they wouldn't try to bootstrap it into a single challenge and be able to pitch that yarn to a judge who will bite? It's always possible, but there is a set window in the law during which they have to challenge that determination, and they deliberately chose not to challenge it because, as I understand, they acknowledged the building was inherently unsafe and didn't need to come down. What that means when you sign an affidavit is a different thing than. But technically, if they wanted to bring an article, if they wanted to challenge under the local law, the window is closed. If they somehow try to create an Article 78 challenge, that's 4 months from the date of the town board determination to take it down. We're pretty close to that window. I doubt it's been 4 months though. So it's still technically possible to challenge it, but given the state of the building, the need to tear down the building is not what my concern is. My concern is that you might be adding something into the mix that might make the underlying right to recover infirm.
So my understanding is it cost us $25,000-ish to tear it down. 23.
26. I think it was 26.
But the ballpark is 25.
Right, you're in the ballpark.
And so 20%, we're talking $5,000.
Right, which I think if you added up your oops, your out-of-pockets, and then try to estimate the amount of time that your staff has put on it, that's probably pretty close.
Yeah, I know, you put a significant chunk of time into it, I know Lynn has,
And anyway, you had to go through the public bidding process. There are costs to that.
Yeah, no, I understand. I'm trying to get a real number and kind of think about the real cost that we incurred. I've seen your bill go by, and you've built on this several times.
Number of questions came up on it because it's the first time through on that law.
Yeah, no, I understand. And
I think a recommendation of 20% is reasonable, and I'd like to see the local law amended.
Well, the next step is, the next step is for the clerk and the supervisor to coordinate and file a verified statement. And that's really the process whereby you crunch the numbers and you submit a verification that these are the reasonable costs and expenses of the town. And I think maybe deciding where in the spectrum you land, whether it's 10, 15, 20, 25, or 50, I think maybe the verified statement actually looking at the numbers might inform that, and maybe it could come back to the board. Because there's going to be a filed verified statement of the total expenses that will be chargeable, if not paid, and placed on the tax roll, and the landowner has the right to challenge that number and say, I don't think it should have been that much, or I don't, whatever.
what do you mean by, are we going to add up your bill and other bills and say this?
Well, you don't specifically add in those. You have the cost of removal plus your percentage for overhead.
Okay.
That's what those ongoing sort of generalized expenses that were caused as a result of this one problem, specific to one particular property that's really benefited as opposed to the community at large. You can debate it, but that's how the law works in these situations. There's a parallel provision under the general municipal law, 78B, that works the same way, but in a court.
So what's our timeline for what we have to do? At what point do we have to do what?
Within the next 30 days, you should be filing and serving the verified statement so you can make the tax levy for 2020. That's the timeline.
So do we need to make something tonight, or do we really have to?
No, because the verified statement has to be prepared. And I'm just telling you, I'm making a recommendation where you decide to ultimately put it and where the verified statement actually works out. I think that's up to the supervisor's charged with filing the verified statement. And I think probably the board should look at the numbers and see if whatever 15-20% makes sense.
Does this take board action, or is this all on that?
Well, I want more guidance.
I understand.
Yeah.
But they're gonna crunch numbers and bring it back to us.
Yeah, that's what I would suggest,
So we
the
can
verified
move on
statement
to
come
the
back.
next.
You can go with the 50% and hope you don't get challenged or hope you survive a challenge.
I don't think
I
we're gonna do
just,
that.
I'm not sure it's fair, and I'm not sure it's a gauntlet of risk that's warranted, but it's your call. It's that's what the law says, right or wrong.
I'm kind of leaning with Katrina at the 20% number. I think that sounds like it's going to cover our costs. This is not a penalty thing, is what I'm hearing. It's a recovering our cost thing.
Right.
That's exactly right.
That's what all your permits and fees are really designed to do, is cover the overall cost of a review.
All right, so clerk's office and supervisor's office will review that and
Share it, and if you think it's crazy, then chime in.
So I guess the action we are seeing is the chicken and the egg type of thing. It's like, this action has to be done first from the supervisor and the town clerk. And then from there, do we have to come back here to make a formal motion for 20%, 30%, 40%, whatever the board decides? Or can we just wrap this up quickly so that we can move forward?
can we make a motion based upon supporting evidence that you will provide?
I mean,
I feel weird about that because I don't have any numbers.
I don't either. I mean, I'm gonna have to go by.
We'll have to get the numbers back.
But on the other hand, you're gonna set this precedent for the local law, which is, okay, is it gonna be contingent on every separate case, or are you gonna go to a ballpark figure of so much?
I think it does depend on cases. If a project takes a long time, lots of legal work, we might go higher. If it's a real quick and small thing, the percentage might be higher because, if we're talking about spending $2,000 to tear something down, we might want a higher percentage. If we're talking about spending $100,000 to tear something down, we might even go for a lower percentage. So I think there is some room for individual projects.
If you're going to have a surcharge at 50%, which merits reconsideration on a blanket level or an individual level, fine, but normally you need to have a set amount so that somebody knows what the result is. There are going to be cases where 20% is going to yield you more than, just like somebody comes in and applies for a subdivision, they pay a fee. In some cases, it's very simple and there's really not any issues, and it goes pretty smoothly, and they actually pay more than the actual administrative cost of processing that paperwork, doing a public hearing. And in other cases, a similar size subdivision has lots of issues. There's a creek, there's objecting neighbors, there's whatever, and it costs a lot more. In the average, you're trying to fairly estimate what your expenses are for the average proceeding, and so you really shouldn't be making ad hoc individualized determination, because that opens the door for invidious treatment. So I would say as long as you're at 50%, you're stuck with that problem, but if you drop it to 20%, then it is what it is. That would be my recommendation.
I agree with that. I mean,
I-
we're, once again, it's an average. So why are we beating this up?
My understanding is the board's generally comfortable with the 20% number.
Yes.
And Ed is able to move forward with the town clerk with no further input from us, so we'd certainly like to know what's going on.
However, we still want a local law on this.
Well, I think if you just want to tell me, go ahead and have Gen Code change that number to 20, that can happen as part of the codification process.
Great.
That makes it
So
simple.
that's a separate issue and a separate vote.
It's not even a vote. That will come up. They're working on the draft code.
It'll all get.
All they would do is adjust that number, then there'll be a local law implementing the code, and it'll on a blanket level take care of all of that.
But I need some guidance, like I said tonight, just 20%, so be it. I move forward on this, and I write has been finalized, move forward with that number, and then the clock ticks as far as the ones we contested. Is that correct?
Correct. You serve it, they have a certain number of days to object and request a hearing. If they don't, then it gets levied.
The bottom line is that property X got cleaned up. The percent we seem to be looking at that was advised by legal and seems to be concurred by the board is defendable. You know, and that's the whole thing I'm looking for, is what we can defend regardless of who owns that property in the future. Otherwise, we risk losing, not only do we risk losing that amount, also the legal fees incurred by defending it amongst everything else.
Right, well, I think defending it is one measure, but I think you can also defend and win on issues that are unfair. I think being basically fair is really the underlying issue, because it's the fact that the number is fair is what makes it defensible. So I would really go, these often are cases involving landowners in unique or problematic situations. It's not the average person who has maintained their home or won the lotto that has this problem with their property. It's someone who's got distress or lost their job or whatever. So these are people often that don't have the extra 30%. So I think 20%, 15 to 20% is what's standard in most of the state, and that pretty well dovetails with the 10 to 15% profit in administrative overhead that's traditional in commercial contracting anyway.
Okay, sounds good.
So we're okay with that, so I can move forward with that number? Are we okay with that? So, having been, once again, I'm in uncharted water here, what the time frame is, I don't want to have to come back here 30 days later and have emergency meeting ahead of time so it sounds like if we're at the 20% mark, whoever's property this is, it sounds like in the future, that'll be
What I hear Joe saying is, please share the verified statement before you sign it, so we can look at the numbers, and, which I think would happen anyway. So
yeah.
Okay.
You also had the fact that it's been from Lynn Day that he's satisfied with the scope of work.
It appears to be done and stabilized,
and it's actually growing quite fast. So when you say verified statement, verify that this has been done for $26,000, which is in the budget amount tonight. Do I do a...
Verified refers to a form of verification, the CPLR, that basically says this can be admissible in evidence and it's a basis upon which to formally proceed to assess. It has to do with a section of the civil practice laws and rules. It's a form that, it's a type of statement that you make, almost like a notarization that says, this is true and accurate.
I think I've asked him to the board.
You'll get the board.
I'm a little weak on the two wishes there for IEG. All right, so we got something done. Now, back to CJ.
Yeah, so to continue on, the Salt Point Farm Brewery and Tasting Room across the way on parcel D, that's what was formerly known as parcel D. It had received, went through sketch plan review with the planning board on July 22nd. I anticipate this coming Monday, they'll probably receive a negative declaration of environmental significance, and along with holding a public hearing on the matter, see what community input is, see essentially what's going on. And we've submitted a formal 239 review to the county, so we'll find out what happens there. And I also want to, this seems like really old news now, but on July 26th, we actually submitted the application to the Environmental Protection Fund through the CFA to fund the series of improvements at Myers Park, as you know. So you should have received a copy of that application. And I really want to give a big shout out to Pat and Jenna, who really helped pull that together and make that possible. I really couldn't have done it without them. And speaking of grant applications, I did just receive the final piece of information from Justice Howell that we need to complete the JCAP, which is actually probably the easiest grant application I've ever seen. So that is super wonderful. That is so straightforward.
How competitive is that?
It's not too bad. It's obviously only available to the justice courts. So we have not applied in the last at least 3 years. So that helps make us more competitive. And then, of course, the ADA improvements are a priority for that particular program, so that will be a big plus. We have at least one quote and a scope of work for that project, and I anticipate having a resolution in front of you for your consideration next month on that particular project. Speaking of scopes of work, a couple last things for you. Again, I've been coordinating with Pat and Katrina Guy on a scope of work for the Parks, Recreation and Trails possible master plan. We're thinking about essentially at least 18 to 24 month significant community engagement project, essentially, to develop a master plan for these spaces. You've already, with your foresight, set up a significant fund to be able to do that. I've also planned to chip in some consulting funding from the planning department, so we kind of work together on this, and we're anticipating essentially putting that project out to the contract reporter system probably early in January, right alongside the Myers Park project. So hopefully we can dovetail those nicely. So I'll have more information about that. I'm trying to just kind of understand the scope of what people want to see, at least broadly. And so I'll have more information on that for you soon. And the last thing, or one of the last things, the county, and I think I mentioned this to you before, has the Business Energy Advisors Program. And they're going to be launching a specific Lansing program, and there is money available for government buildings to have energy evaluations. So if you want, I'll just get in touch with Andrea, and we can think about the highway building expansion / renovation and just use the free money to do that. So.
Is this a matching grant, or is this just?
No, it's just money that's available. They contracted out with CJ Brown and Tatum, are the two companies that are basically doing this kind of essentially free energy modeling. I don't know the parameters of the project, how that works for government, but I've been sending people there as part of typically site plan review. Chris Hesse wins, Andy Serrano wins part of this project, and essentially anyone coming in the door, I basically send them there. Why not? It's free energy modeling, and it certainly can't hurt their County 239 review. So if you're open to that, I'll go ahead and just get in touch and see what they have to offer. And then, do we actually have a contract with Tompkins County Soil and Water Conservation District? I heard Cricket mentioning we're working on that project with them for the stream bank stabilization. Do we actually contract with them for services, or are we just like, okay?
No, we don't contract them for services. This is a project that is very typical, as Ed and I have been working on the last several years. These different projects pop up in our neighborhood, and we bang to do the project in Buffalo, probably would have saved the taxpayers $100,000. So finally on board with the right people down there, and so this is just a joint effort with us trying to utilize the funding, and we're doing some manpower, so it's a win-win for everybody.
Nice, okay, so that's probably a water quality improvement program project through DEC is my guess that they've got a bunch of funding for, but the reason I'm asking is because we have a project, pending project, where TG Miller has a conflict of interest or stormwater review. So I'm going to need a secondary stormwater review services, and Tompkins County Soil and Water is the best affordable people. They're CPE is CE certified, and that could be a good secondary option. So I'll probably, if you're comfortable with that, bring that to you for your consideration next month. It doesn't necessarily have to be anything long-term, but it's nice to have that backup because TG Miller does frequently have conflict of interest situations. They just do a lot of work around the county. It's no reflection on them personally or anything. So, and I think that's really probably plenty for me right now. But any questions?
No, we have done a great work with the local law for the store. Research on that. Found some interesting points as far as, we already talked about this later, especially with our public hearing, but with the minimum amount of, or maximum amount of acreage.
Yeah, that's one of the things we can go back and talk about that, or I don't know if we're going to.
We're going to hopefully move these resolutions through.
We talked about that tonight, we're just setting up a public hearing tonight, and next meeting, we're really talking about the need of that one.
Okay.
I have no problem not talking about this tonight, considering we won't get out of here by 10 anyway. So Anyways, but the input at our public hearing might be essential for people who actually want to implement this. Because like anything else, you know, we can all have our theories, but when you have people actually who've done this work, they give us a much clearer picture as far as what works and what doesn't work. Should I drop no hints, gentlemen? Not either.
And you would, you know, the questions and comments you have or changes you want to see, feel free to just send them over to me. There's input, I welcome all of it. And once I know you feel at least comfortable kind of disseminating the document and kind of at least considering advancing it, I'll go ahead and I anticipate maybe early next week getting this out to county to actually ask them for a formal review. So thanks for being patient with that. It's been a little awkward because, you know, I was trying to ask the county a lot of questions about how they thought they would handle this review. And, you know, it was their recommendations were done in the kind of the aftermath, I think, of the Dryden solar law, which had, of course, its own issues, and I'm sure you're very familiar with. So the idea is to get out in front of all of this, make sure that we get full participation and engagement, and really get comments from a huge swath of people, from agriculture to landowners to county developers, you name it, really. So it's all much appreciated. And of course, yours is the most important.
No, you did an excellent job. Thank you again.
Yeah, actually, I think the most important is getting widespread public input. That helps us make the decision in the end. But it's much better to get a wide variety of people in, and I really appreciate you taking the time to really get the message out there and to really solicit from different constituents their opinions.
Thank you, and thanks to you, we certainly tried. We posted at least 2 public information sessions. Dan, Lansing Star, was kind enough to walk me through how to post those on both the calendar, put a public announcement out. I talked to members of the press. We ran out and changed the sign so that once the BZA meeting or CBA meeting was done, we basically alerted people that the next night there was going to be the public information session. So we super duper have been trying for sure to get the word out about it. So again, send people our way. I'm happy to even just sit with people and talk to them. I've had a lot of good conversations.
I wish I could have made both of them, but I did come to one.
Yeah,
Really do
yeah.
want to hear that input.
I'd like to move on to number 13, so thanks, CJ.
Yeah.
And
Thank
you,
you.
nothing for Mr. Herrick. 14, agriculture report, nothing from Connie this month. Let's move on to item 15, resolution authorizing trip interload water main replacement repair project and authorizing public bidding for materials. Cricket, you got anything to add to these? Let's go straight forward.
All in favor?
I'll move it.
I'll second. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz?
Yes.
Doug Dave?
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore?
Yes.
Edward Levine?
Yes. Item number 16, resolution to relevy yearly water and sewer charges on the town and county tax bill. This is exactly what guys mentioned earlier about putting that on your tax bill. This is something that we did. I'm going to further than that. Would someone like to make a motion? I'll move it. I'll second it. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz?
Yes.
Doug Dave?
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore?
Yes.
Edward Levine?
Item 17, resolution of final order approving formation and establishment of Warren Road Sewer District Extension number 1. That's where the DOT is, up in that area, for people to get our districts confused.
I will move that.
I'll second it. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz?
Yes.
Doug Dave? Joseph Wetmore?
Yes.
Edward Levine?
Item 18.
Rick, sign this one. When do you want us to come in and sign this one?
We'll send you guys an email when it's ready.
Okay.
But probably maybe Friday morning at the earliest.
All right.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. So, next one is resolution scheduling public hearing for proposed local law number 2 of 2019 to amend the land use ordinance relating to solar and wind energy systems proposed to be sited in the town of Lansing.
I'll move it.
I'll second it. Oh, Doug's second.
It does.
So
Okay.
Joe, you're first, and then
Sure.
Doug?
And this will be at 6:31 on the 18th day of September. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz?
Yes.
Doug Dave?
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore?
Yes.
Edward Levine?
Item 19, resolution supporting Tompkins County Water Resources Council staff request to Tompkins County legislation to preserve and improve the water quality of Cuda Lake and its watershed. Joe?
I move that.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz.
Yes.
Doug Dake.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 20, resolution hiring Perry Cook as a part-time laborer for the highway department.
Quick question on the previous one. That's going to get forwarded to Tompkins County by the town clerk, I guess?
Yep. I'll coordinate with Deb and make sure it gets to the county, Ulysses, et cetera.
It needs to get there pretty quickly because I think there's a deadline of like Friday, so.
I will make a note to coordinate with her tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Now, is Deb wants to hear more?
Yes.
Okay. Excellent.
Just pushing it because I know the county needs to hear this quickly or it's not,
I
there's no
understand.
effect.
I understand.
Back to Perry Cook.
Yes.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz.
Yes.
Doug Dake.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 21, resolution updating employee Kevin Price's position in job classification to full-time MEO.
MEO.
Motor equipment operator.
What's MEO stand for?
Motor.
Thank you.
Those are ones with their Class B license, right?
Correct.
Okay. I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
Sure.
Joe seconds it. Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz.
Yes.
Doug Dake.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes. Item 22, approve audit and budget modifications. I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? Mrs. Hall?
Katrina Bankowitz.
Yes.
Doug Dake.
Yes.
Joseph Wetmore.
Yes.
Edward Levine.
Yes, board member reports. We have an executive session to go to, which will be lengthy, so one thing I'm thinking of doing in the future is that if we have lengthy board member reports, perhaps you can submit those as part of the packet. And just do it that way. I'm more looking at you, I'm more looking at you because I looked at them first. That's the reason.
I understand why you look at me.
But I also looked at them first, so don't take this personally, because I can get wordy too.
I know that, and I don't take it personally. I know I have lengthy ones. It's often hard for me to get it together before today.
No, but I'm simply saying as an idea, if you have some interesting stuff that you want to share, and there's a lot of details to it, at least then we'll have it on paper, so people can see it. But in the meantime, board members can give about 3 minutes each at the most if they want to zip through these things. That would be fine, or you can submit it later for 3 foot minutes, okay? So, let's start with you, Joe.
We'd have to check with Deb if you can submit it after the equipment minutes.
Well, I think you're right, we can, so.
Correct.
Go ahead, Joe.
Okay, TCOG. We got a report on, what do you call it, that Tompkins County is going to do a study on short-term rentals and share it with the towns to tell us where in the town there are short-term rentals going on so we can more easily understand what's going on in our community, which will help us with our planning to know who's doing short-term rentals versus who's living there. So that's in the process. The county's working on a backup for the emergency dispatch center. I guess they're having some issues with that. They're also looking at combining the mental health department and public health department into one department. And they're going to be experimenting with that this year. They gave us a review. They're going to be doing the water resources training program this fall, and they reviewed that with us. And the other interesting thing, and this is really important, I've been talking to CJ about this, they're putting together a group of code enforcement officers, a place for them to come and talk about their issues so that they can share information and share ideas. And that's going to be starting up in the fall. And
Sounds great.
it sounds wonderful. It's kind of like TCOG for the code enforcement officers. And so that's in process. And as soon as I get a date for that, I'll share that back. Cuba Lake Watershed, we passed a resolution on that already. The ITC meeting was canceled for this month, but I'm working with Fernando and CJ about getting us a voting seat on the policy committee. And this is really critical because that's where the money gets distributed for projects through the Transportation Council. Lansing qualifies for a seat. Lansing hasn't had a seat, and we aren't getting money as a result. So I'm going to be coming to us in September with their memorandum of understanding. That's the first step for us to get a seat there, and then we request that their policy committee approve us. This last happened with the town of Dryden in 1996, and you can see they get a lot more money through this program having a seat on that board. And so if there's any questions now, I can answer them, but that's the process. Probably by the end of the year, we get approval. Website, I've got a list so far of about half a dozen or so changes. You wanted your punch list I've been putting together. I don't know if anyone else has had any things they noticed that would be improvements for the site.
I mentioned one to Dan, and he's interested, so.
I'll take a look this weekend, just once a minute.
I have a Word document of things that I was gonna send you, of things I've seen on the website.
So you're gonna send it to Dan?
Yep, I'll send it to Joe and Dan.
Okay, so you send it both, I'll send it to you, and then hopefully in the next few weeks, we can get that next step up of making it nicer and nicer. And Peter Wheeler, I'm looking on finding a picture that will grade nicely. The only the only picture I have won't turn out nicely as an engraving on the plaque, and I want something that looks nice. And so it's hard to find somebody from the early 1800s and get a good picture of them, because there's not a lot of them floating around.
What kind of budget do we have for these plaques, just in general?
We haven't set one.
I mean, give us if you can't do some research, give us a ballpark figure.
Okay.
We're also going to probably do something on those lines for the staff. Okay, anything else?
That's my report for this one.
Okay.
Try to keep it quick.
CJ already mentioned what the planning board went through with their report. That's good for that. Standards will be.
I talked to Mary George. She's back from this cruise. She's one of the people that pushed hard for this also.
He's the one who brought it.
Yeah. And I talked to Bonnie Bowles. They'll be here in October. We won't be here in September, so we hope to do this in October.
Yeah, I won't be here next week.
Yeah. So hopefully have that dedication, and hopefully we can put the plaque next to the code office, because that's where he did a lot of his work. That's all.
Sure.
I'm not reporting anything.
Okay. Now you have anything?
Nothing that hasn't already come up, except to say that I'm in Doug's camp and I won't be here in September.
A couple of things that we dealt with, obviously going to a lot of these different meetings, went to the Air Service Board. They're concerned obviously about the outages. We had a half-hour conversation today with the new district, I guess, coordinator for NICEAG, Joe Gentlecore is his name. And we're setting up an informational session, probably will be in September, so the public will be able to ask questions as far as these outages go and what's the concerns. As you probably know, the insulators were the ones down at Cargill that was a concern in January and February. They had to observe them going down. They did everything from helicopter observations to people walking the lines, and they finally solved that problem. So that was the first part. This last outage that happened yesterday, that was a tree that fell on the wires up at Trip Hammer. I was obviously working at tops and went down. The tree caught on fire. They got dispatched. They cut the power, got the tree off, and got the power back up in 12 minutes.
Wow.
I had a nice 45-minute conversation with Carl Taylor, who is the president of NICEAG today, about a variety of different things.
He's the president tomorrow.
I hope so.
Those things change quickly sometimes.
And I'm losing this tonight. I'm losing the board. They're going rogue on me. So anyways, long story short is that rather than chastise everybody, like when we went to the public information, public meeting about the 23% rate increase, there was a very angry crowd there. They were very critical. I showed us to take a different path. I posted that on Facebook today. I'm trying to work with these people, considering that we're going to have a long-term relationship with them, and hopefully we can find some positive ground. It's up to the PSC to decide what the rate increase would be. We all vocalized. I actually asked them for a 23% decrease, and we'll see where this all goes. But sometimes you need to have some reality in the room, and I mentioned the thing about the power outages amongst other things. So having talked to Carl Taylor about this, One of the things is that we have the outage notification, which is an app on your phone. You can get that off of nicesec.com. One thing that I asked in the future he's trying to do is the ETR, estimated time of restoration. At the same time, he'll try to put the reason why on there also. So people don't also jump all over because the lines are antiquated, the lines are antiquated, the lines are antiquated. Well, this was a tree that fell. And one thing he pointed out to me, well, exactly. One thing he pointed out to me is that even though they may trim the right of way, if you have a 100-foot tree that's out of the right of way that falls on, what are you going to do about that? So, as I mentioned to him, I said we need to do a little PR campaign here to give people accurate information. Because right now it's a raw nerve in Lansing as far as power outages go.
You can get that if you call.
Yeah.
You get an estimated time for
Restoration. But this time will get the reason why it went out. Like in this case, because a tree fell on it and it was on fire. Okay, and in 12 minutes it was back on. Yeah, our computers took a while to boot back up. Our cash register took a while to boot back up. But you knew it was 12 minutes.
We rate hand receipts.
No, actually, we have backup generator there. We have lights, but everybody else was minimal. It was interesting. UScan still works because they're on the backup generator. So.
Can I ask you a related question? Because they just resprung the cable, the phone company down
Spectrum.
our line, and they strung it lower than they did before, and right now it's hanging below the level of Jeff Cook's corner.
So, not to take up too much time, that has been a battle. I talked to the representatives, I talked to the state senator. They have to work with NICEAG to allow NICEAG to raise the lines. Some farmers just drive right through and hack them. Other places.
I don't know how Jeff can. I mean, the line is literally lower than the corner.
And I've had a series of conversations with Jeff Cook. We also share concerns of the fact that they left wires in the hay, they got tied up in the hay, so they threw the hay away. So I was not kind to them on the phone, let's put it that way. So ever since then, I've had a series of phone calls that they now have a sense of urgency. But Spectrum needs to have the approval of NICEAG to raise it up higher. So this is an ongoing battle.
They would go through Spain really quickly.
That's all I have to report.
Next.
We would like to move to executive session. We have a variety of topics to discuss tonight. One of them is proposed pending a current, nope, let me rephrase that. One of them is the proposed acquisition, sale, lease of real property. That actually is probably two of them. One of them has to do with either medical financial credit or employment history of a particular person, core or matters leading to said dismissal, removal, promotion, of employment, discipline, demotion, or suspension. So we have three different topics. I can repeat. Yes, whatever.
Collective bargaining, I think that's a separate issue.
Collective bargaining, I'd like to be brief about that, though.
But we have to tell everybody the reasons we're going in, and that would be one.
I didn't want to go there tonight, but I think you're right. We should go there quickly.
Yeah.
So then the fourth one is the collective bargaining negotiation per Article 14 of the Civil Service Law. Yep, I got it on here. So, I guess we'll
I
move.
move that.
I'll second it.
No need to vote to go to executive session.
We vote yes.
So CJ,